We usually have two lights on, but that's anyway. Welcome to the February Cabinet. I have some apologies. I have apologies from Ruth Houghton, who will be substituted for by Sarah Marston. And both Dawn Hoosman and the leader of the Conservative group cannot be with us today. And for both items or anything that either of those are involved in, we have Ed Potter representing them. So we should. Yes. But as Ed has pointed out, he is just scrutiny. Yes, absolutely, for Dawn. Thank you very much.
Yes, I will have to leave as well at some point. So I will leave for the item.
I think this makes us a very cohesive council, so thank you for all of that. Thank you very much. I think that's all clear now. Can I have any other declarations of interest? Rob, and then James, and then...
Despite having a dispensation. I thought I had, sorry. It's not working. Is it? Yes, the light's on. Oh, sorry. That's okay. Despite having a dispensation, I will declare an interest in item 17 and will agree with the League of Shrewsbury Town Council.
Super. Councillor James Owen.
As a member of Oswestry Town Council, I do declare an interest by the dispensation for item 17.
Thank you. Councillor David Walker.
Likewise, a member of Oswestry Town Council, I've got a dispensation for item 17, but I'm also going to declare an interest in item 19 for the neighbourhood area. As the portfolio holder, and I'll leave the info.
Thank you. And James is going to declare an interest for
item 19, and I will leave the room.
Okay, thank you. And then I have David Basman.
I'm a councillor on Shrewsbury Town Council, but I have a dispensation as far as item 17 is concerned.
Thank you. And Rosemary Darton.
Yeah, thank you. I am also a Shrewsbury Town Councillor, but I'm a decision maker on neither council, so I don't need to leave the room.
Excellent. I was worried at one point that I would not be chorus. But Tim has sorted that one for us. Thank you. Anybody else? Bernie.
Thank you. I'm also a councillor on Shrewsbury Town Council and have a dispensation for item 17. Thank you.
Alex?
For completion, also Shrewsbury, however, because I have waived my request for a dispensation at the Shrewsbury level, I will be here for the Shropshire items because I'm not taking part in the discussion at the Shrewsbury level.
Thank you very much. And of course, wearing a chain is ceremonial rather than decision making. Okay, thank you very much. So, in which case we now move on to minutes to confirm the minutes of the meeting all held on the 21st of January. Have a proposal, please. Thank you, Alex, and a seconder. Thank you, James. All those in favour? Unanimously adopted. Thank you. So we now move on to our regular guest, public question time, and a question tabled by Mr. John Palmer on domestic abuse support.
Thank you very much, Chair. Shropshire Council has the autonomy to decide to further prioritise and substantially increase funding for local specialist services to tackle domestic abuse and offer much more support. I know the Council actively invests already and in September 2025 allocated Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government funded community grants to Shropshire Domestic Abuse Service and West Mercia Women's Aid, which also runs a 24/7 helpline. This is from Shropshire Newsroom Story, 22nd of September 2025. As the wonderful Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips said when launching the government's strategy to halve violence against women and girls on 18th of December 2025, this is a national emergency. Will Cabinet be more ambitious and further aim to help change culture and further invest from local council taxpayers' pockets to much increase the capacity of support and help? And does it wholeheartedly support education to prevent misogyny for boys in our schools?
Thank you very much for the question. Sarah. Can I just say that Sarah is sitting in, so has been fully briefed with the portfolio holder, but is very able in her own right.
Thank you. Shropshire Council, on behalf of the Domestic Abuse Local Partnership Board, has recently published a draft domestic abuse partnership strategy for public consultation. The strategy has a vision to end domestic abuse, a goal to reduce domestic abuse across Shropshire within the next 3 years, and sets out how we will achieve this by collaboration and a coordinated community response. The strategy was developed by all partners, including those from our Lived Experience Advisory Group. I encourage you to engage in this consultation and share amongst your networks so we have a wide range of feedback from all people and all communities. And the deadline for this response is the 2nd of March. By working in a partnership, we are able to share and maximise resources and increase our capacity to provide the right support at the earliest opportunity and at the right time to people who need it. We recognise in the draft strategy that the government has committed to halve violence against women and girls, and we reference the recently launched national strategy, Freedom from Violence and Abuse, which we wholeheartedly support. We eagerly await news from the government of any funding to be allocated against this strategy to enable local areas to implement the actions within it. The uplift to homelessness, rough sleeping and domestic abuse grant announced as part of the overall financial settlement for local government earlier in the week may also result in additional funding for domestic abuse services locally. Shropshire Council is committed to education that prevents misogyny and helps children and young people understand the importance of respectful language and healthy relationships. This commitment is reflected in our role as contract lead, working alongside Worcestershire, Herefordshire and Telford and Wrekin on behalf of the West Mercia Community Safety Partnerships under the Serious Violence Duty. Through this partnership, we have commissioned West Mercia Women's Aid, The Right Path, and Everyone's Invited to deliver interactive talks, workshops and small group sessions in schools for both young people and the professionals who support them, as well as community-based one-to-one and group work. The aim of this programme is to challenge misogyny and dismantle harmful stereotypes.
Thank you very much. Do you have a follow-up, John?
Yes, thank you very much for that. I do. Does every decision-making politician around this table agree with Jess Phillips that this is a national emergency?
I'm sure people will say yes and no around the table. I most certainly do. It is a significant issue. Okay, Bernie.
Thank you, John. As portfolio holder for health and public protection and as a consultant obstetrician and gynecologist, I wholeheartedly support these measures to improve safety for women and young girls.
Great. And can I just say that unless anybody disagrees, if you disagree, tell me now. If not, we will assume we all do. Okay, thank you. We all do. We now move on to the member question time, and we have one question, and that's from Councillor Rosemary Dartmoor around the North West Relief Road.
Thank you. The total amount of public money spent on the controversial and now stalled North West Relief Road project reached a staggering £39 million. The project was advanced determinedly by the council despite no written confirmation of increased funding from the DfT and warnings from our external auditors about risks related to substandard project governance. This money was spent between 2019 and 2025. We in Shropshire have absolutely nothing to show for it. Please list what exactly this money was spent on, including a list of amounts paid to each named contractor.
Thank you. We then move to David Basman. I'd be delighted to answer you.
Thank you, Leader. Yes. The table which will be published with the answer to the question shows the supply and payments made against the North West Relief Road project in the period 2018 to 19 to 2026. These are split between the Oxon Link Road and North West Relief Road projects, as is a requirement for financial monitoring across the two separately funded elements. It is to note that project development activity with all contractors was paused with immediate effect following the elections in May. Essential environmental monitoring activity only has continued. This is reflected in the 25-26 year project final returns as required by the DF. The following activities, which is not exhaustive, have been undertaken by the listed principal contractors in support of the project. 1. Balfour Beatty. Procured through the SCAPE framework, Balfour Beatty have managed the provision of ground investigation and piling works along the project alignment in order to assess water table depths, ground conditions and supporting geological information. This has been used to inform the initial and then detailed design of the road and its associated structures, including the proposed viaduct over the River Severn. 2. WSP. As a council key term contractor, WSP have provided all initial and detailed designs of the project, environmental monitoring and baselining, the preparation of the full planning application, landowner and stakeholder engagement and consultation, support with the main contractor procurement, preparation of the initial outline business case, and also the completion of the full business case in line with DFT's requirements. 3. Anthony Collins Solicitors, ACS, were commissioned through the Council's legal framework form project start in order to provide the detailed legal support and advice around the project. Decision to appoint an external legal advisor satisfies the requirement to keep the Council's own legal team aligned with the local planning authority only, therefore avoiding any conflict of interest. ACS have provided advice and support around main contractor procurement, preparation of draft contracted contracts, the preparation of the full planning application, oversight of the preparation of any council decision papers, and the negotiation and legal form of required licenses, agreements, and Section 106 documents involving third-party landowners and stakeholders. 4. Quay. As the council's term maintenance contractor, Quay have also been used to oversee the later phases of the ground investigation and groundwater monitoring equipment installation along the project's proposed route. There is a table, two tables published with this answer, which details all the spending. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm just going to list the major figures. The payments to WSP for the North West Relief Road up until the 10th of February is 21.9 million. To Balfour Beatty, it's 4.6 million. And to Quay, it's 2.9 million. On the Oxon Link Road, the principal payments are to WSP of 3.5 million and Balfour Beatty of 0.5 million. Thank you.
Thank you, and we may well look into some scrutiny work and lessons learned around this when we get to that point.
I do have some supplementary.
I was just going to ask you. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, it almost feels like we should have a minute's silence to think about all of that. It's shocking, isn't it? So I want to ask a couple of specific things, David, and I know that you'll want to come back on them. So first of all, the Balfour Beatty scoping work. I mean, a lot of that data, I have to say, I'm a geologist, so a lot of this stuff is in an area that I know a lot about, but a lot of the ground investigations, the substrate work, it looks like it's from the money and the description of the work, that it's being done in a bespoke way for the specific areas where the piling would be done. That's of course necessary, but there's a lot of data available already. BGS data is available readily, and given the location of the Shelton pumping station, there's abstraction going on there and water taken from the river. you know, we understand the water table in that area very well. So I'm surprised at how much was spent on that. You know, yeah, that just seems a little bit odd to me. But then I look at WSP, I mean, 25.5 million, it's an absolutely shocking figure. So that 25.5 million over the two projects combined, was the contract for this work a simple one? Sort of, you do this work, we pay you, or was there any element of results-based incentivization there? Because it seems to me that the project has failed. It never managed to get planning permission for which they were responsible. And that was mainly due to water supply contamination concerns, which are covered in point 1 at WSP. So that bespoke work should have revealed whether or not piling would impact on the water table and therefore the water supply. So that should have been revealed. If it wasn't revealed with a spending of 25.5 million, then I don't think we'll ever know, is my opinion on it. Another £10 million to Quay for oversight. Overall, David, a question I think you can answer is, given the 2019 funding letter from the DFT granting 54.5 million, 54.4 million for this project, clearly stated that any spending undertaken by Shropshire Council on this project would be undertaken at full risk. That means full risk of the council, not the government. So given that, do you believe that the scale of this spending was wisely undertaken?
Thank you, Rosemary, for your question, which I know thank you before. So thank you very much, because I think it's very useful data has been produced. I personally think there has not been enough proper oversight of this project. And I think it's clearly there has been not only this project, but other projects where there hasn't been proper oversight. And we need to make sure going forward that this sort of spending never happens again, that we are in total control of what is being spent. The points you make are interesting in terms of the investigations, and obviously given your professional expertise, that is something we'll look into. And certainly we are going to review the spending and to make sure that that we learn the lessons from this. As you say, the amounts of money are eye-watering and for nothing. So I think we will be coming back with more details and more recommendations as a result.
I think around that, we're very concerned across the board, across the council, about contract management and making sure that contract management works and that you have a single point of accountability for all of this, because otherwise it gets spread and it's really difficult to get a grip on what's going on. So it will be part of the probably task finish and lessons learned, so that we don't go here again. But as you will know, we're putting a number of things in place now around procurement and contract management that hopefully will embed and make sure we don't go here again. We now move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is partnership working task and finish, which Ed, as a Conservative, is going to outline for us because Dawn Hoosman can't be with us today.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm a member of the Task and Finish group. I sit on the Task and Finish group largely from being a scrutiny chair, just because there's a lot of overlap across the piece of work. So, but I can't take any credit for this. Dawn has done a large amount of work along with the rest of the committee. I'm much more of an observer rather than actively partaking. But I'm happy to present the update to you and the report today. For the second, which is the second report of the Partnership Working Task and Finish Group, which has been looking at how Shropshire Council can strengthen collaboration with partner organisations to improve the delivery of local services. Since our last update in November 2025, the group has completed the second phase of its work. This phase is focused specifically on partnership engagement with town and parish councils, particularly in the context of the proposed devolution of street scene services. Because the devolution work is so different to the nature from the wider partnership plan, these two issues will now be separated and taken forward by two different task and finish groups. Over the past few months, our engagement has centred on town and parish councils. We wanted to understand their experiences, responsibilities and existing working relationships with Shropshire Council. To do this, we ran workshop sessions in Bridgnorth and Ludlow with a further rural cluster workshop planned for the spring. Those workshops brought together clerks and chairs, and the discussion highlighted clear differences between the needs of rural and urban areas. Attendees emphasised how important local knowledge is for effective service delivery. We want to place on record our thanks to the clerks and chairs who have taken the time to take part and help in this work. A number of challenges came through strongly. These include limited funding, unreliable or inaccurate data about local services held by Shropshire Council, and the growing pressures on clerks due to increased workloads. Many also felt there has been a deterioration in relationship with council officers who were often seen as remote or not sufficiently connected to local communities. There was also concern that additional bureaucracy could undermine long-standing informal arrangements that currently work well and rely on goodwill. We have also had considerable reservations about the proposed introduction of we have also heard considerable reservations about the proposed introduction of community boards. Some felt the boards risked duplicating the function already carried out by parish councils. In rural areas especially, the shortage of volunteers was highlighted as a potential barrier to making any new structures effective. Clear and consistent communication with elected members was also repeatedly identified as being essential. Overall, town and parish councils told us that they wanted to see tangible benefits from any new partnership approach. They wanted arrangements that improved efficiency, avoid repeated past mistakes, and most importantly, are built on mutual trust. This trust is sadly lacking at the moment, and it is vital for all partnership working going forward. They were very clear about wanting to retain control of the resources and services that best meet their local needs. From this work, the Task and Finish Group is making 3 recommendations, which you'll see in the report. First, that the Shropshire Council and the Town and Parish Council should jointly carry out a data audit to get a clear understanding of the current position, to clarify current and future responsibilities of local services. Second, that the development of any partnership model must be transparent, well communicated and genuinely collaborative, avoiding added bureaucracy wherever possible. And third, the Town and Parish Council should be actively involved from the outset in designing any partnership arrangements. Looking ahead, the refocused partnership work in Task and Finish Group will begin mapping all existing partnership arrangements across the council. We know there are positive examples already, particularly in health and social care, and understanding these will help us identify best practice and build more coherent approaches to partnership working across the organisation. And those are Councillor Huseman's words, so very much from her as chair of the Task and Finish.
Thank you very much, Ed. That's really, really useful. And Alex?
Well, thanks, Em. Or more importantly, thanks, Dawn, even though she's not here, to place it on the record, because I know that the work she's done on this group over the last sort of 8 or 9 months has been a huge undertaking, and also vitally important to developing the right policy. I just thought it'd be useful to start by saying back in November we had the first tranche of recommendations from phase 1 of the Task and Finish Group, and at that cabinet meeting I said that we would essentially take our best endeavours approach to implementing all of them. We have limited resources. Some of the recommendations, for example, establish minimum service provision. Well, that's a council-wide policy that's going to take time and might come in parts rather than as a sort of cohesive single output. We would do, and I think we have. So, for example, on the looking for a single point of contact, I know that we are going to be having a place director come in soon who will be able to sort of take a more active lead on this scheme. We've also developed job descriptions and governance models around having a potential town and parish liaison officer to help make sure that this administratively works. This year was always going to be about using existing resource to get some pilots going and start having those conversations. Next year is or rather from the 1st of April, is going to be about expanding that and learning from those pilots. But on the report in front of us, I would say we will do what we can with all of those recommendations. In the report, we have the data audit suggestion. I think that's sensible. I think that the only comment I'd make is we probably need to limit that to obvious areas of interest You know, if a parish council fancies taking on social care, as a resident of Cardington asked me, I'm not sure we're going to realistically be dedicating any resource to that idea. Very different with Lengthsman and Street Scene and parts of leisure, libraries and that kind of wider communities brief. Similarly, with transparent and honest working, I agree. As I say, we have over the last few months negotiating pilot schemes about which we will hear more later at this cabinet meeting, learned an awful lot. You know, part of the logic of, instead of getting everything absolutely ready and then presenting it to places, but to have some pilots and get things moving this year, was sort of predicated on two things. One, there was active willing interest from a number of places that wanted to get moving and didn't want to have to wait an additional year. But two, it's meant that I think we've been able to iron out some of the issues and actually, frankly, do it for the first time. You know, that the work that has been done so far has, I think, pretty comprehensively, with 3 different arrangements at 4 different levels, ironed out what the obvious problems are in doing that on a greater scale, but also meant that we fixed a lot of those problems already. You know, there were things that 3 months ago or 6 months ago when I was speaking to Clark seemed insurmountable that we have done, we have changed. You know, it hasn't been a clean process, but it is a pilot, and that was always the point. Go through it in full first before we commit to going out to the whole of Shropshire and all the other 149 parishes, but also learn what we can along the way and about the sort of consistencies and governance we need to put in place. Which brings me to that recommendation about town and parish council being involved in the joint development. Absolutely. This cannot function. That almost goes without saying to me. For any of this work to be a success, we need joint buy-in, and it has to be co-designed. But what I would say, going back to some of those earlier points about providing information, I think the onus is on us to provide the sort of framework for that. So I'm not saying they're contradictory, but they could be contradictory in certain areas. And I think we need to still provide a level of leadership, given there is one of us in 153 parishes, to say, here is what can be considered, here is how you express your interest. That's in both services and assets that we have, both of which we'll discuss a little bit later in this meeting. The last one is providing regular communication. So again, we'll have as appendices to the devolution of services item later at this cabinet meeting, the communications which have gone out to all parishes. We've tried as best we can without compromising individual discussions between the 4 pilot areas to get as much information about what we're doing, especially to places which have essentially signalled to us that they'd be keener on pursuing these sort of arrangements in future. We will continue to do that. We've done that roughly quarterly so far. I think that's probably 3 communications in the last 9 months, more than they've had in the last decade or so from Shropshire Council. So I'm hoping that starts to turn a corner. And we've also been making sure to keep regular contact with SALC. I understand SALC had a discussion yesterday about helping also provide some framework for their members. We want to make sure that these discussions are smooth and easy and as low bureaucracy as they can be whilst doing the due diligence, but also both us and the sort of parish and town sector probably need to set some parameters and provide advice that doesn't start to mean interests begin to conflict. So much like with the previous set of recommendations, which we've already been working on over the last 3 months or so, excepting Christmas, we will accept the recommendations with the best endeavours approach and see what we can do to implement them over the coming year. I think a number of them we have to implement if we want this to be a success. So we'll certainly be prioritising them and communicating as appropriate.
Thank you. Bernie. Thank you, Leader. Clearly, with regard to health, the Health and Wellbeing Board is already not in place for in trying to ensure that there's adequate partnerships, and there have been discussions about the increased participation of local members in some of the discussions about the items such as community and family health hubs and neighbourhood health, the neighbourhood health agenda. And I'd just like to stress that local member knowledge is a critical resource that's been underused historically and clearly needs to be part of the partnerships. I'd also like to say that some of the informal VCSE organisations, which are often unincorporated, but nevertheless provide a considerable amount of support locally, should be involved, and the local member is usually ideally placed to know about these informal VCSE partners. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have an answer to that, Alex? Or
I don't have an answer. I think it's a fair comment, but we'll take on board.
okay, yeah, it's something that needs to be built in, isn't it? Okay. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add to any of that? Thank you, Councillor Potter. Right. In which case, we presumably we will propose that we take those recommendations forward and look at them. So Alex has done that, and we will have a seconder, which is James. All in favour? So, thank you very much. It's unanimous. So now we move on to the estimated collection fund outturn, and I'll ask Councillor Roger Evans to present that.
Thank you, Chairman. Today's agenda is long. I'm going to be speaking on a number of them. So I'm trying and reduce the amount of words that I use in the essence of making good use of time. So this one, estimated collection fund. The report is largely a factual one, reporting the total council tax collected in 25-26 and what is estimated will be collected in this current year. As stated, this has to be reported separately as Shropshire Council collects funds on behalf of other bodies as listed in the report. It was originally estimated that for the current year, Shropshire Council would receive £260 million in precept income. Unfortunately, it is now expected we will be 1.465 million short of that. This means that the deficit, as shown in 5.5 of 1.206 million, has to be incorporated into the 2026-27 budget. The reason for deficit is shown at 5.3 and is due to an increase in contributions to the bad debt provision. I propose the recommendations as listed at 3.1 to 3.4 be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? I'll just deal with that. Alex, thank you very much. So, comments and questions. Rosemary.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. Just a quick question, really, on item 5.3 that I think you finished on there. The bad debts and moving things into bad debt, is that part of clearing out bad debts? We've talked about that in different places, at different meetings, and we've talked about clearing out bad debts that really are debts we will never recover and doing a sort of spring cleaning on that. Is that what you're talking about here?
Shall I ask Duncan to come, because Duncan's been doing an awful lot of work on all of this at the present time. Duncan, would you?
Thank you, Chair. The bad debt provision is a formulaic calculation that looks at the amount of debt that we have on the books and its age. And this year, the review has seen that provision going upwards. And you're absolutely right in saying that we are carrying debt within the collection fund, which is very old. And we're starting a clearing out exercise. We're adding some capacity back into the Revs and Bends team to allow us to get that off of our books. Hopefully by the end of this financial year, we can then review it again through the course of next year as we move forward. And it's just a housekeeping matter for the most part.
Rosemary and then Ed.
Yeah. So do you have any idea of the volume of that? Do you know the really old stuff?
I'm sorry, I haven't got my forensic lens on that one yet, but I'm hearing that there is some debt that goes back as far as 20 years. So the likelihood of ever collecting that is clearly remote. I admire the principle though. I mean, it's always good to collect debt that is owing to you and to drive down every avenue that you can to collect it, but sometimes it just becomes more expensive actually than it is to actually write it off.
Ed, so
obviously we're seeing a bit of a trend here of lower collection rates with potential increases in council tax moving forward. In terms of building in capacity into the team to follow up that, is this the capacity you're building in now to meet the need currently, or is this a potential for what might increase in the future, with particularly with people under cost of living hardship and things like that?
Rich.
It is both. I was amazed when I saw the amount of bad debt that we had on council tax, and it going back to 2004, prior to the unitary council. Whether we could collect that or not, I raised many questions, and there were some member questions concerning the number of staff that are employed in that department, and again expressed concerns, and the administration is looking at increasing that department to both chase the bad debt but also look at council tax payments being made by residents in Shropshire, because due to government changes in some of the way that they pay money to those on benefit, it needs to change. And if one looks at the previous reports, it will be stated that we are looking to bring forward recommendations sometime in the late summer, autumn, to actually change that methodology to take account of the hardship that some residents are facing in paying their debt. And I call it debt, but it's the council tax that they've suddenly had increased from the 20% to the full tax rate, unfortunately due to change in regulations.
Thank you. I don't know whether you need, that's fine. Okay, anything else that anybody else wants to raise around that? It's an area that we're acutely aware of, and we do need to put a lot of effort into, and it's one of those areas that we'll be using the exceptional financial support from government to help clear up if and when we have that signed off. Okay. Thank you. We have 3 recommendations there. 3.1 through to 3.4. I have a proposer and seconder. Are we all in favour? Thank you. It's unanimous. So we now move on to Roger's next paper, which is fees and charges for 26-27.
Thank you, Leader. The financial problems we have inherited is now better understood by everyone here. Fees and charges are one of the 3 principal areas that provides us with income to run our much needed services. The proposals being made today, if adopted, will raise just under £105 million, as shown at 3.2. We do, however, also recognise the problems our residents are facing, and every cabinet member has spent time working with officers to produce the figures contained in the attached appendices. Government also, of course, set the fee levels of many services, and further details of those are shown in Appendix 2. In December, Cabinet adopted a revised policy in the setting of these fees. On those fees we do have control of. Others, the council will be asked to endorse that policy at the next council meeting. Following that principle, the aim here is therefore to increase the ones we do have control of by at least inflation, with a target of full cost recovery. Some, as listed in the recommendations, are still currently under consultation, whilst others are detailed in a separate report being considered later on in this agenda. Housing rents are also subject to restrictions as listed in 3.7 of the report. We have tried to make the increases and the associated totals as transparent as possible. If members do have queries or questions, then please either raise them today or contact the appropriate cabinet member. taking all the above into consideration, whilst also trying to ensure that no one sector is unfairly penalised and have a sudden jump in fees, I ask that recommendations listed at 3.2 to 3.7 in this report are agreed, and we recommend them for adoption at the next full council meeting, where all members will have had time and an opportunity to look at and consider what this cabinet is proposing. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Questions, comments from anybody? Rob?
I just thought I should point out that there aren't any rises to parking charges in these changes. We did change those back in November. It felt that doing that at this point was realistic or appropriate. There is an ongoing further review of parking charges across the county. We know that there are concerns, for example, in Ludlow, because some of their charges are tied to Shrewsbury, but they thought they may be too high. So we are looking into all of those things alongside TROs and other parts of parking and traffic regulations. But just to point out that there are rises in here, parking charges, but we did do those in November.
Anybody else? Certainly got Councillor Andy Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to actually see there's been no rise to the whole homeschool transport that was brought to my attention. That's a sensible move because it would only generate a very small income, which probably wouldn't be worth the costings of doing so.
Absolutely, and many of us over the years have been acutely aware that most of those people having to pay homeschool transport fees live in rural areas. If you live in a town, it's much easier for you. So we will be looking at that again, but it raised so little money, it was just not worthwhile. Councillor Edward.
So I'm now Dan Thomas.
Yeah.
this has come from him. Thank you. Dan is a rural surveyor, so he has some knowledge around planning. And then within the increase of 5% proposed for all pre-apps, he's highlighting an example. For example, the change of use application, which over the border is currently in Staffordshire is currently charged at £150. Shropshire appears to be charged at £557, with an increase of £279. That takes it to £836. So his question is, what analysis has been done on the impact of this? The rationale being that lower pre-app prices could result in more pre-apps, so actually more money coming in. And there will also be a saving in officer time as resulting in planning applications being of better quality. It's not just planning, he says, there's other examples he could have picked out as well.
Thank you. Good challenge, David.
Yeah, no, it's important, even where we've got the statutory charges set, that we make sure they work optimally so we get the best return. And some of that is part of the reason why we're looking at making sure we've got the right number of planners in place so we can actually turn things over optimally as well, not just in terms of the rate of charge, but certainly when I've talked with officers, they were content that they were on the money in terms of comparators, and because we can't charge a profit, so it's got to be within the range of comparators. So I'll have to look at the specific example that Dan's brought up, but happy to do that.
And you'll then circulate that.
Yeah.
That would be great. You've got to.
Yeah, I suppose it's sort of from an economic growth point of view for Shropshire, I think it's important that we look at our immediate neighbours, because particularly from a business and attracting inward investment into the county, we want to ensure that when you look at perhaps if you want to do a development in Shropshire or start a business or convert something, that, you know, if 10 things are more expensive in Shropshire than they are perhaps in a neighbouring local authority, that might tip the balance. So I think that's also something to keep an eye on from an economic growth point of view.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, no, I get that entirely, but we also have to look at the SIP for nearest neighbours, because they're probably a better comparison in some ways than our nearest neighbours who demographically are completely different to us. So we've just got to bear all of that in.
Thank you, James.
I just want to sort of use the opportunity to sell our cultural assets, especially like castle and museum examples, because they can be used for things like weddings, and I think our prices, we are freezing them for weddings, so it's a good sort of point to try and advertise that, to try and get more use into these facilities because they are they're extremely valuable to Shropshire and part of our history. So it's just, I was going to take the opportunity to do my job and sell them even further.
I think that's an excellent way forward for Cabinet. We're here to sell our services. Excellent, thank you. Anybody else wants to raise anything else here? I also always like a surprise as well, James. Yeah. Right, okay. In which case we have 3.1 to 3.73 in recommendations. I think the other important that we need to actually approve. I think the other important point about all of this is that we do need to get it right, but actually it's part of us improving our income, and that has to be reported back to our improvement board, because everything we're doing at the moment is overseen and looked at by the improvement board and externally by the LGA and MHCLG. So all of these things are really important messages that actually we're working in a comprehensive and reliable manner to turn our finances around for the future, so that we can actually provide good value services to residents across Shropshire. And that's what it's about. It's about good value services to residents, even though we have to go through some pain to do that. So I have a proposer and a seconder, I think. Who was the seconder? Alex, thank you. All those in favour of the fees and charges? Thank you. Right, we now move on to the very shy Roger Evans to do Treasury strategy, please.
Thank you, Leader. Can I say that I will be moving recommendations to this, which are different to the ones that are in the papers. There are hard copies if anybody wishes them to see. This is taking into consideration the recent government announcement. So if anybody would wish a copy, there's some here.
I think this is not Treasury management, this is financial strategy.
All right, have I got the wrong?
Yep.
I've turned the page over too much.
It's just, we're on Treasury strategy, but keep hold of the papers because they're actually important, because there's some tweaks to the recommendations for the next paper. Yeah. So Roger, if you can just do the Treasury strategy.
When I can find my agenda papers, I will. What number is that? Number 8?
9. Okay,
got it. All right. Apologies, I skipped over the page because it's such a short report. As shown at 3.1 and 3.2, the Audit and Governance Committee also received this as part of their probity and regularity of the Council's financial affairs, plus endorse this strategy. Cabinet are asked to recommend the Council approve in sections 3.3, parts A, B, C and D of it, and also authorise the section 151 officer to exercise the borrowing powers as listed in 3.3 parts E and F of the recommendations. I move the recommendations as set out in part 3.3 of this report.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Rosemary.
Yeah, just a question. I mean, in the time, in the relatively short time that I've been a councillor, the council's capital investments have reduced. That's not the right word. It plummeted really in that period, and we now, according to 5.4, have 24.2 million in investments and borrowing of 415 million. It seems all at fixed interest rates. I can remember from my days on the audit committee that there was a lot of skilled manoeuvring of, sorry, that sounds a bit dodgy, it never sounded dodgy, skilled movement of investments, loans being short term and then moved into longer term loans when the conditions were right. I'm just wondering whether you know, what our situation is, because it seems to me like we're now in a very, very different place in terms of the amount of work involved in our Treasury strategy.
I'll give you my answer. Duncan
Duncan.
might come in a moment and give his. When I was the other side of the table in the opposition, I made many, many comments in the past about the lack of investment, invest to save. Some here may remember me making those comments. If we go back to 2017, we had over £100 million in the bank in cash. Now it says in this report what the amount is that we have, and we have failed to invest it. It was used to pay down some of the debt and did not do it. And Grant Thornton, in their actual report, the last audit report that they did, where they did pass some strong recommendations for the council, one of them was that in their opinion, the council was underfunded. We needed to borrow more money to do some of the projects. And at the present time, with the amount of cash that we have been left with in the accounts, means that to do anything now, we have to borrow. And that's why the swimming pool, health centre, all those sorts of things are having to be paused because we cannot afford to borrow. There is nothing in the bank that we can do. We are looking at assets to see what we can generate to actually enable us to do that investment. We do need, because for the future, we need to increase our revenue. And the best way to do that is to invest. Thank you, Chairman. And I don't know if Duncan wishes to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Roger. I agree with all of that, actually. From this is day 23, so I apologise for not bringing history and background. But a big component of what is happening in the Treasury report at the moment is the fact that we have used our cash for our investments, our capital investments, because that's what everybody is doing at the moment. The rates have been low, so we've been earning nothing substantial on our short-term investments. So we've used the cash to forego the higher rates that we get on the fixed rate longer-term borrowing. We're now in a position where we're having to borrow to restore our cash balances. So there's a movement now into borrowing short term to get the cash balances back to a higher level again, so we can just fend for ourselves on a day-to-day basis. From a capital point of view, I'm quite surprised to arrive here and see that we've only got about £400 million worth of borrowing. That for an organisation and for a place of this size, that seems very low. That's clearly historical and indicates that we've probably been using over and above our short-term cash. We've been using capital receipts and other sources for our capital programme. But for a substantial or a significant capital programme, you do need to borrow. We're now, of course, encumbered, though, by the fact that we're entering into EFS, where we'll need to be borrowing for our revenue accounts. So we've got a number of conflicting things going on in the system at the moment that make it very complex. And that really, I think 26/7 will be a period of stabilisation to see where we get to. And we can then start looking at some of the kind of opportunities that Roger and yourself mentioned.
I now have Councillor Ed Potter.
Thank you. Sorry. I note it's interesting to say about low levels of borrowing comparable to many other local authorities. Also, it's important do we think it's important that we bring forward some of the capital assets in terms of strategic developments we have, particularly with the Riverside, where there's opportunity, Shire Hall, to move forward at pace in order to realise some sale of capital assets, generate revenue that can then either be used to invest or fund the future capital programme. And I think pace is something that this local authority isn't necessarily used to. And I think it's very much imperative that that happens now, because there are opportunities out there that really need to be brought forward quite quickly.
Absolutely, and we are looking at all of that because it is very vitally important for our future. So while we're doing that, that's why many things have been paused. I don't know whether you want to comment on any of that, Rob, or whether we want to come back to finance, but actually about economic development and so on. That's also important area when we talk about Riverside.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we've obviously got Riverside in its first phase now. So there's a lot of money gone into the ground in what's known as the park. But actually, I think if anyone observed what was going on with that work, there's a lot of engineering underground, and that's to do with flooding, but also particularly groundwater and holding water. That's where the money is. The money isn't in the grass and the play park on top. The money is actually underground and hard engineering. But really, we do need to advance that project forward. It is a thing that council has invested in for good or ill. We can go back into history, but I don't really want to right now. But we have control of that land. We do need to develop that for the good of the county. I think we're looking at getting more people living in the town centre. Then that's a good place to do that. It does require investment and significant levels of investment because of the ground conditions there. There is a viability gap between how much it would cost to get that house to ground, really, and then start building on top. So that is going to require investment from somewhere, whether that's the government or from the council. But I think, as Duncan said, right now, we do need to kind of pause and reflect on everything to get to a stable position before we advance forwards and actually make those investments.
Are you happy with that? Yeah. Duncan.
Thanks, Jed. Just building on your earlier points about the LGA and the MHCLG having their eyes on us, they will absolutely be looking to us to inject pace into our disposals programme for a variety of reasons, not least we don't want to borrow for revenue purposes if we can generate some of our own.
Absolutely. So is there anybody else that wants to raise anything? Because this is quite an important paper. Okay. Thank you. A proposer and Alex will second. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. So we now move on to the financial strategy. I wouldn't mind a proper copy of the recommendations myself. Thank you. So, Roger.
Yes, here we are, actually at the right place in the agenda. This is a report, and members will see that it says draft, and it's draft again today, because it was published, and a few days ago, the government changed the guidelines a little bit. The final local government strategy has just been announced and published yesterday, and I can confirm that in relation to central government funding support for the council, there has been no significant changes, and the only item of real change relates to additional grant funding of £183,000 next year to support homelessness and rough sleeping in the county. Therefore, as previously reported, the council will see a reduction now of £4.4 million in government funding compared to funding received in the current year. This, of course, is disappointing after all the lobbying that has been carried out by all our MPs and this council and many others. Yesterday's announcement, though, granted the council additional council tax flexibility for a further 4% increase beyond the current referendum limit of 4.99. This is difficult consideration for us all, as we are very aware of the cost of living pressures our residents are facing. However, we also have a duty to ensure that the future financial sustainability of this council and the continued provision of much needed services for our residents continue. And this was failed to do for a number of previous years. I have taken the advice of the Section 151 officer and propose an amendment to the recommendations within this report, and will shortly ask him to share these with the Cabinet. The extra 4%, if put in place, would generate an extra 8.8 million over and above that which would have been generated by the original 4.99%. We have been given permission to increase the council tax for 2026-27 by 8.99%. And it is deducting this 8.8 million from the 13.3 million, which leaves the 4.4 million, which we are still short of. It would have been good to have it as a grant, because this council tax, or this 4.4 million, we will be having to borrow to replace it. The final decision regarding the amount to increase the council tax will of course be made by the council in a few days' time. In the meantime, Cabinet is being asked today to make a recommendation regarding what we think the council tax should be. The extra much needed income would reduce the level of borrowing the council were required to make in order to set a balanced budget at the end of this month. Instead of £130 million, this would reduce to £121 million for next year. This will save the council between £700,000 and £1 million in future years in interest costs, which we feel is ultimately in the best interests of our residents. It goes some way towards meeting the deficit in income caused by years when the last administration failed to raise their council tax. Also included in the government's announcement yesterday was a change to the High Needs Dedicated Schools Grant, DSG as it's sometimes called, as detailed within the Financial Monitoring Report for Q3 being considered shortly. The council is projecting at present an overall deficit position to the end of this year of £42 million. The government announced a special grant to all education authorities, funding equivalent to 90% of this deficit for next year. Further details on this will be included in the report to council later this month, along with the implications for the other 10%, which will not affect our financial position until 2028. Also to be considered is the fact that no answer has yet been received to our request for emergency financial support, both for this current year and next year. The budget proposal is made on the assumption that this is agreed. This, as will be noted, is a draft recommendation to council. As a result of yesterday's announcement, the recommendations I am asking Cabinet to agree today have slightly changed, and I will read them out for anybody who is watching. 1. The Cabinet note that the final settlement has been received in line with the provisional statement, and in particular the special permission for Shropshire to raise an additional 4% supplement above the council tax limit of 4.99%. 2. That the Section 151 officer be requested to make amendments to the budget report to be presented at council on the 26th of February to include a recommended supplement of 4% on council tax with a compensating reduction in the exceptional financial support. 3. That the Section 151 officer be requested to ensure that appropriate officer support is available within the council tax team to provide advice and guidance to those who may be most impacted by this increase. This is to ensure they are receiving all financial support available to them through the benefits and the government crisis resilience scheme. I move those recommendations.
Thank you very much, Roger. I mean, this is a really, really difficult decision for all of us. But when you looked at the previous papers and so on, that gap in our budget is significant. And the graph that was produced and we've seen in other meetings from the Rural Services Network shows that actually our grant funding from government is decreasing over the next 3 years, and it's one of the worst across the country as money is shifted out of rural areas into more urban areas. So we are now in a position that not only were we fighting the problems that we inherited, but we are now fighting a grant settlement that is decreasing across 3 years, which is significant, which is where the 13.3 million came from, and the 8.8 million that council will probably be asked to put in. from council tax will make a difference. This is not what any of us came into politics to do. All of us represent people across the county where we want services to improve. We want to make sure that highways and their contracts and so on are delivering for people, that we're providing the best quality social care that we can. These stresses that are now in front of us are far worse than anything that we would have expected, far worse. So anyone who thinks that actually we are suggesting putting an extra 4% on the council tax is a decision that council will take lightly are gravely mistaken. All of us have people we know that we represent who will struggle. So what we are also doing along these, as you will have seen, is asking our 151 officer to make sure that that extra help we put into council tax, into revenues and benefits, is then used to make sure that everybody gets the maximum help across the board that we can give. The government has put in the Crisis Resilience Fund this year, which is different to the fund we've had in the past. And that is about looking at vulnerable people and people who are struggling. So we will be using that in the best possible way to make sure that we alleviate the stresses that this will cause to a number of people. That advice has been difficult to get hold of. We've, I think, about half an officer available. The CAB is, you have to wait a long time to get an appointment, to get those things in place. So the things like pension credit that people still are not getting, even though the government had a drive on it after the winter fuel payment issue. There are people who would qualify for council tax benefit who are not getting it. There are a whole range of things that we can do, but we do need officers in place to be able to give that advice and make sure that we can go through all of that. There's a real role for Shropshire Local that are going out around the county to do things. There's a whole range of things, but it's really important that people realise we understand exactly where we are, but we're now between a rock and a hard place. And that hard place has got a lot harder. And on top of all of that, we're being watched by the Improvement Board and MHCLG, who've just allowed us to do this. We are one of 7 councils that can do this. Only 3 can put it up by 4%. And that is a recognition, I believe, from government that what the money we've got coming in is really not filling the gap that we actually need filled. We also see quite a close neighbour in Worcestershire doing exactly the same as us. So this is not something that is unknown across the board. This is something that is facing all councils. There are over 100 this time that are going for exceptional financial support. And in the coming years, if things do not improve, we will have more needing to put their council tax up. There were a lot of councils that put council tax up last year. And they're not all councils that have served a 114, and we haven't, and nor have Worcestershire. So I just think we need to put that in context, because we are still here to provide the best possible services for those people who really need them. And it is about residents, and it is also about us enabling people who are struggling to get the help that they may need. I'll open this now to the floor. Ed.
Thank you. So it's a very difficult position that the council finds itself in. I mean, the council's own consultation response admits into the local provisional government settlement, admits that the funding was fundamentally unfair. The figures speak for themselves. Urban councils now receive somewhere in the region of 41% more funding per head than rural authorities like ours. Any increase in core spending power is driven entirely by our residents paying more in council tax, while our actual government funding is reducing in real terms. This isn't a failure of local management, it's a rural penalty imposed by Westminster. How will residents cope with an increase of 9%? I welcome the comments by the leader around what more can be done to support those residents who will fundamentally find it very difficult to pay this extra money. I also feel for residents, particularly in where their town and parish precepts are also increasing by significant amounts in order to cover local services that perhaps can't be met from that would have historically been met by Shropshire Council. The burden from social care particularly is one of the fundamental reasons why Shropshire Council finds itself in a position like this. And the increase in the last 9 months has been, it shows that trend is still continuing. So my question is, what can we do as a local authority to ensure that that message is clearly getting through to government? Because from what I can see at the minute, whereas the last administration have tried to protect local taxpayers from the burden being placed on them, it is now fundamentally being placed on local taxpayers one way or another, either through an increase in council tax or from the fact that the special financial support loan is going to have a revenue implication on this local authority for many years to come, which is only going to impact our ability to deliver the best services possible. And of course, with many rural residents here paying high council tax who don't get the level of services that urban areas will get. And that's coming from, as yourself, a very rural councillor, where we have very little services at all from Shropshire Council, yet pay the same level of council tax on a Band D property as those in our urban centres, and is not comparable to those in cities and more metropolitan areas.
Right, I will let Roger come back on that. I will then go to James and then not to Dawn. Thank you. You haven't been here for the previous jokes. Okay, Roger.
We need more finance. We are underfunded in every respect. I understand the decisions that were made by the previous administration in trying to keep the council tax as low as possible, and the number of years that they made 0 increases in the council tax. However, we are now paying the penalty for it. If one looks on charts at the level of council tax in Shropshire, we are in the lower quartile compared with many others. Herefordshire has got similar financial problems to us, but their council tax is a lot higher than ours. So we are catching up with it with this 4%. I don't want it. It is not what I wanted. I wanted to make things happen within this council, things that my communities want. And at present, I can't do it. We need that finance, both from the council tax, but also from investments, and look at transforming this council so that it is better at collecting money, at delivering its services, far better than it is at present, and that is a cleft stick. We have found that there is parts of this council which are operating, and it's my words, on virtually a skeleton basis. They have not got sufficient staff to do it, and a lot of those staff could actually generate income. So we can generate income from the services that we offer, as well as going out to the residents. And I made the fees and charges comment earlier on today about we have tried to keep the charge increase to a reasonable level, although we're going down to zero level increases in the future, and we are making as many staff as possible realise that we are in a position where we need to look at our costs and keep them minimal. The budget we're setting is such that we expect to make it. We expect officers to deliver it. There will be, hopefully, very little overspend there. We need to build up our reserves as well. So, yes, I don't want to put up council tax, but if one looks outside and looks at some of the media increases that they've made in some of their newspapers locally, they've increased them far more than what we're doing. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, I have James, I then have Brendan, and then on screen I have Duncan. So, James.
I think I just want to point out, as a portfolio holder for sort of leisure, that even this rise won't move us away, where currently these services such as leisure centres, the libraries as they're provided at the moment, museums, etc., are going to be funded from borrowing. But even this rise won't move us into that position. So the difficult decisions we're still going to have to make despite this 4% rise is it's a matter of this tax that residents will be paying more. They still won't be paying for their library services. And the only way we can get out of that position is more funding through whatever means are possible, or reducing those services to save the costs. And again, it's the rock and hard place that you mentioned before, but these sort of services that I'm covering are what people expect a council to deliver, and sadly the government doesn't expect us to deliver by law. So it's a matter of, it's just going to be a very difficult sort of year. Despite having to make a difficult decision now, it's not going to make our decisions any easier.
I think what that underlines is that partnership working, whatever it is, with whoever, whichever partners we have, and there are a number of partners, not just towns and parishes, where towns and parishes can top up so that they get a better service than the basic ones that we're going to deliver, but actually making sure we've got other partners out there who are not delivering similar services to us, and that we can do it together. It all begins to save money. We're looking at all of that, but actually many of these services we will have to be doing that and doing it slicker if they're going to survive, because otherwise we can't do them, and that's the raw truth. Brendan.
Thank you. I'll take the opportunity to apologise for my late arrival. Long story, which I'll not bore you with, but sorry for that. On the 4% uplift to the uplift, you gave a figure of 8.8 million. First of all, do we know if that's been correct for likely non-collection rates? Have we any idea about whether the non-collection rates will go up with the increase of both this? And as Councillor Potter points out, the precept increases, has that been modelled? And the other question I have specifically on that amount is if that same figure had been raised through additional borrowing, what would have been the repayment term and the annualised likely payment on that, if that was the alternative mode of raising that sort of sum? Thanks.
Okay, Roger, and I may have to come either to Duncan or to Manny for that, but yes, Roger.
Right. Thank you, Chairman. As far as modelling goes, as much as possible has been done. The announcement was only made yesterday, and that's why it says the 151 officer to make amendments to the budget when it goes to council later in February. Collection rates, if we do it at 98%, 99%, 96%, that assumes that this that will satisfy the budget requirements for the council in council tax. So it's where we set our percentage is what is actually collected. And that is disappointing in that we have got council tax debt building up, because that shouldn't be there. 8.8 million, it is our latest estimate. Duncan may come back in because it's his staff that have done it, have completed it. But we hope that is correct, and because we will be looking at the budget on February the 26th. Sorry, was there something else you said?
Yes, it was to do with the comparable borrowing method of raising that sort of money, and how much that would cost annually over a given period of time, over the term of that borrowing. Okay.
If I can, I would suggest what will be done, but it'll be up to our officers how they do it. What happened last year when the Conservatives borrowed nearly £28 million in an emergency fund, they took the loan out for 2 years in the assumption that in 2 years' time the interest rates will have dropped. It's up to our Treasury team to take out the borrowing as they are advised and as per the methods that they use, whether it's over 5 years, 10 years, 25 or 50 years. That will be the repayment time. And that's why we want to raise the 4% council tax, because that, if we don't, that money will have to be borrowed, and the £130 million will be even more for people who inherit this council. And we need to reduce our borrowing to the minimum possible. So it is buy now so that we can invest and reduce our future requirements.
Can I just finish off there?
Yeah.
Or thank you. I appreciate this Hobson's choice. You know, we must increase either taxes or borrowing. So we're in that dilemma. I understand that. I'm getting deep concern and feedback on the doorstep from my membership that this is the double whammy, as Councillor Potter pointed out, of both the precept rises and the structural, let's call it 9% for round figures, increase that will then be the baseline for obviously for future increases compounding over time. So I just wanted to be very clear about the cost benefit analysis between borrowing and taxation, because obviously they're both bad choices, and I understand you're on the hot seat having to make this sort of choice, but would like clarity on the pros and cons of both methods of raising the money.
I think we'll come to Duncan.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
These are moving parts, and we're working on this kind of stuff all the time. And as Roger says, we've had 24 hours really to vegetate on this one. As a rule of thumb, I always use 10% as the cost of principal and interest-free payments on any debt. It can be lower, but we are obliged to follow certain Treasury rules through audit on that point. But 10% is a nice, easy number to remember. So on 8.8 million, we'll be saving what otherwise would have been 880,000 a year. So that's 880,000, which will not be stuck on our books for some years to come. In terms of the borrowing, that's as much a negotiation with MHCLG and the Treasury as anything. They will give us guidance on what period we take that over. But there is no way we'll be in a position to repay all of this debt in, frankly, the foreseeable future. So this is debt we'll be encumbered with for some years to come. So let's say 10 years. But it certainly won't be short-term borrowing. At the end of the day, however, with the council tax rise, my recommendation very strongly is that it has to happen. If we do not take the opportunity of taking this 4%, then I'm not sure what the ramifications will be through MHCLG, because they've clearly worked out with Treasury who are trying to prevent borrowing. They've worked out that there is a transfer of resources down into the local authority, as is happening all over the country. To be honest, so I don't think we've got any choice, in realistic terms, to not take the opportunity of the 4%. And the risk is if we don't, we find commissioners arrive, and that won't be in the interest of our residents.
Thank you. I'll just finish up by saying that obviously it's incumbent on you to present this to the public and to the taxpayers, but I think this needs to be clarified and presented possibly by the time it gets to full council in a way that can go out to the public, because we're all going to get a lot of criticism and anger about this. And of course, as I said, it's Hobson's choice. I'm not saying that this is being done flippantly, but yeah, I think the presentation side is going to be very important. So thanks.
And you would expect nothing less of us, really, Brendan, because actually communication is a vitally important part of all of this. And we have thought long and hard about this, and there is no real way through it for us or anybody, as have reform-led Worcestershire found, actually. If you watch what they did on Sunday Politics, they're in exactly the same position we're in. And actually fleshed out exactly the same issues that we had. They may be at a slightly different level, but they're putting theirs up by 4% as well. So, yes. Brendan, did you want to come back?
Not right now.
Okay, thank you. I now have Duncan and then Alex.
Thank you, Heather. I think quite clearly this is regrettable but inevitable given the scale of the deficit. Apologise for a croaky voice. Effectively, it reverses 1 year of those 4 or 5 years that we had the council tax fees for, doesn't it? But it still leaves us particularly short of where we would have been. I do think we need to write to the government on this because what's happening is social care crisis is being put onto council tax. And we know the council tax is the most regressive tax we have in the sense the poor pay most. And we need to make that point because if it had been met out of income tax, it would be a fairer distribution of that burden. So that's my first question, whether you'll do that. The second question concerns the Crisis Resilience Fund. My understanding of this, I don't know a lot about it, is that we have to put together a local scheme. So I would like to know the time frame for that local scheme, because the moment this hits, even today, people are going to be saying, oh my God, what's it mean for me? And the sooner we can have details of that Crisis Resilience Fund available to them, the more reassuring we can be. I understand there's about 800 million available across England. It would be useful to know what sort of allocation is predicted or known for Shropshire, so we can sort of start to point people in that direction. And then thirdly, getting out of EFS. I think it's useful, Duncan, given the figure of 10%, because I think we've tended to focus just on the borrowing cost without thinking about this MRP, the minimum revenue provision, which we have to make against borrowing, which is a sort of accountancy way of starting to suggest you've got to pay off the principal, not just the interest. And so borrowing is very expensive. And going forward, those costs will mean we'll be providing less services. And so we desperately need a plan to ensure that we can get out of EFS in the future. I was on a webinar with Grant Thornton yesterday, and I have to say there isn't a lot of good practice at the moment. There are many councils who have slipped into EFS and are still stuck in it 3 or 4 years later. We do desperately need to ascertain what best practice is around here, because although it was inevitable this year, we must make sure it's not inevitable next year and the following years. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. I will come back to a possible campaign around all of this a bit later. So the first part of your question I will deal with a bit later, but I'll come to Duncan for the rest of this, the Crisis Resilient funding, which we don't seem to know a lot about at the present time.
No, we don't. We were waiting for the instructions from government. They hope to get those published this week, Duncan, and then we can fire into actually in terms of how to make best use of the fund in the context of that earlier recommendation, really.
And what was the last bit, Duncan? I've forgotten.
Sorry, can I just say, do we know how much? Just ask Duncan.
No, we have no idea.
Okay.
None of that.
One was to write to the government over the failure to address the social care crisis at a national level has meant the costs are being dumped, but you're dealing with that later. And then the third year is, are we preparing an action plan which will take on best practice for those who have got into EFS, and a few have got out of it, but not many, as to what we need to do to make sure it's not inevitable for future years, although it's inevitable for this year.
I will now refer to the expert, Duncan.
Well, first of all, exceptional isn't exceptional anymore, is it? It's quite normal. So we'll have a good audience, I think, Duncan, of other councils that we can go to look for that best practice. It's quite unusual, though, how different circumstances are from borough to borough. I've come out of London, 32 boroughs. You think they would all look the same, wouldn't you? But they're all very, very different and have different components. But I would say, and probably feed into the future planning point, we are being driven by social care costs at the moment. Social care costs are taking over council priorities. And whatever we do, we've this year, I think, become a little bit entrenched in fair funding and the distribution of grants. And we've been fighting over scraps, actually, because the cake for local government simply isn't big enough anymore. And for the main reason is the demand pressures and incredible inflationary pressures around social care. The amount of agency staff that we have to use because there isn't a market for social workers anymore. So in terms of the lobby moving forward, I think local government across the country has got to get behind the fact that we have an unsustainable position and all of the effort that has been put in. And can I just say thank you very much to Manny, who's it last week, and to Cheryl and the team for helping prepare a budget in what has been an unprecedented year for Shropshire and for many other council in the country, but it's what we do about this lobby to get fair funding for social care. Otherwise, we risk reverting to where the position that we've come from, I think. And Duncan, the 10% that I mentioned does include MRP.
Right, thank you. I will now move to Alex.
Thanks, Heather. So, the basic economic problem is unlimited wants, limited resource. And I think that when you look at our fundamental duties, statutorily and discharging them, particularly in social care, as we've heard about, and SEND and some of those other factors, demand is growing at such a pace. And you look at that demographic growth, you look at that inflationary growth in the appendices to this paper, that plainly the amount we're getting from government and our council tax receipts are not covering it. The penalty for that, as we've heard, is borrowing. But I do think we also need to be clear about what we mean when we talk about services. I've knocked a lot of doors in lots of different wards in Shropshire and gone to lots of parish meetings. A common theme in all of them is people tend to think there is a pool of money being spent somewhere else, but not where they are. I'd sort of posit a response to Councillor Potter's point about not receiving services. Are there not vulnerable elderly people receiving social care in Leighton? Are there not SEND children receiving a significant amount of council support? Is that not the case in all of our divisions? In Shropshire Council is providing more services than ever. It's just those services are in an ever diminishing sort of pool of the population, and rather than being spread out perhaps more evenly, it's going to those base statutory duties of local government. But when we talk about borrowing, I think we are talking about essentially the classic dynamic between short-term popularity and long-term pressure. I don't think that the financial rigour and responsibility and decisions taken at this council over the last however many years, 5, 10, has been sufficient. We would not be in this position if there were. We've already taken out exceptional financial support. We're now looking at 70 million in year this year, 130 next year, more going forward. Those are decisions which, if we don't stem the flow of money going out on those discretionary services, will mean that the debate is stationary in Shropshire. We're here in 5 or 10 or 15 years, whoever's in cabinet or administration, having to talk about ever greater council tax rises, ever diminishing pools of support from government. I suppose what I'm really getting at in terms of trying to put across our attitude is we are willing to take short-term pain for long-term gain and to bring some financial responsibility and rigour back to Shropshire Council. We cannot go on like this. If we make any other decision than to proceed with, taking on board our external auditor's advice about minimum statutory provision of services and zero-based budgeting, if we don't take every opportunity we can to increase our revenue, we create a bigger problem for someone in the future, even if that isn't us. I'm not willing to do that. Whether or not I'm a councillor in however many years' time is irrelevant. I live here, I'm born and bred here, I'll still be living here, I'll still be paying my rates here, and I'd quite like the council to succeed. So I think really what we're getting at is that we are willing to take those painful, short-term, difficult decisions if it means that we can get back to a position where this council is financially sustainable, but also financially responsible, because I think the lack of trust in how Shropshire spend its money has been a significant point on doorsteps at parishes with partners over the years. If we don't restore that, then we're not going to be able to achieve some of our other wider ambitions and fulfil our role in the community, even if we don't have the resource to do what we used to be able to. So I will hand back there, but I'm very content, and I'd be happy if Roger needs a seconder as ever to second his recommendation.
Thank you. Shall we lighten this slightly as a little bit of good news at the end of the tunnel? We know that across England in particular, we have councils who have huge deficits in their dedicated schools grant. They have a budget that sits to the side of their other budgets that actually, if it went back into their main budget, would actually make all of those unitaries and counties dealing with that go to 114 immediately. They are so large. Ours isn't as big as many. It is still sizable. But the government has this time, so there's a bit of light at the end of the tunnel, realised the significance of this. And the significance has meant that they are going to write off 90% of that. And how that extra 10% works exactly in the modelling around that, we still need to see. But it will make a significant difference to many, many councils and would to us, because at the moment it is set aside. And next year it may not have been and would have been put back into council budgets. My hope, I'm touching, if I found wood in here, lots of wood and crossing fingers, that at some point the government's going to realise that much of our debt is around adult social care in the same way. It is a bigger issue, but at some point council funding is going to, for unitaries and county councils, is going to have to look at how they deal with that for the ongoing future, because otherwise we're just borrowing money to deliver services and spending an enormous amount on interest to continue to do that. Rosemary?
Yeah, just a comment on that really. I mean, this situation we're looking at in government of lifting up a bonnet and finding stuff there is sort of replicated here down the line, isn't it? And I think for me, what we're looking at nationally and here in Shropshire is what we're worried about. What you're referring to there is it's the end game of austerity, as far as I see it. Austerity has taken, it's gutted local authorities in our country and it's gutted public service. And it's not something that can be resolved in a moment. So the government is aware of that. It's clear in the ministerial statement from yesterday or the day before yesterday that they're aware of the SEND budgets, the DSG budgets that are just hanging there as a sort of noose to catch many a local authority. And the same with adult social care. They're aware and they're working, they tell us, to resolve those things. And I think, personally, I have faith in that. You might expect me to, but I have faith in that. And those are serious things that affect our country fundamentally, and they have to be resolved in some way or other. And I have faith that the government will do that, but it's not going to be the work of a day or an afternoon, is it?
Thank you, Rosemary. I'm still touching wood and crossing fingers. So, Dave.
Thank you, Chair. The shift from government to local government has been going on for decades, and it's not a new phenomenon. And so is our mantra on fair funding. We've been banging on about that, and I've spent decades, it feels like, campaigning to get rid of council tax for something that's more progressive and less regressive. But we are where we are. As Heather said, it is a rock and hard place because, unlike the government, we get squeezed at both ends. It's not the government, they've got a big problem, but we've got a structural problem with the council. We've got no wiggle room left. Previous councils have squandered our resources, whether it's in reserves or anything. So essentially, as a council, we're shafted by events, whether it's previously or government or whatever. And it's an invidious position. Nobody in this council wants to be in that position, but I have to say it is disappointing the government have recognised the problem but said the solution is you can sort it out with council tax. It should have been a better settlement from the government, because we know it's wholly unfair the way they distribute the thing. Having done their review on to building fairness, it's patently transparent that it's gone into more urban authorities and hamstrung rural authorities. So don't really want to dwell on it, but I'd echo what Duncan said in terms of money, because I'm very grateful for the work she's done while she's been here.
And we will miss her hugely. But I told her I'm going to go into a corner and cry. So just to, I think there is a significant piece of work we need to do to make sure that our situation and the way funding is happening for us, but in many other rural areas, is a huge piece of work, and we need to have a really good campaign around it. We certainly need to bring all of our MPs together to make sure they're working cross-party on this, because I don't think that just picking off an MP in Shropshire does it. We have to have support from all of them if we're going to move this forward in any way, and I'd like to see them have a joint campaign to do this, because it is much more powerful if you've got cross-party doing these things. On top of that, we need to be very clear and work really well with the Rural Services Network, who actually provided us with our graph of what's happening to our funding. The Rural Services Network have been doing work on rural service funding for as long as I can remember. And well before we went unitary, they were doing all of this, and they were called sparse at that point. So there's work we need to be doing with them and the County Council's network, because they all watch our backs and lobby. But we have to be much more robust in the messaging we give. We need our local press to be actually batting on our side, because we won't always get things right. But unless we're actually out there making a fuss publicly, people don't understand where we are, and we don't get the pressure put in the right places unless the public are supporting us. So it's a matter of making sure that we work all of this together to have a joint front to make sure that we improve that funding. It doesn't matter who's in power here, they're all our residents, and they all deserve better than they've got at the present time. Which brings me back to those changed recommendations that we need now to look at to take forward to council. And we will be working up some sort of quite loud campaign, and it will have to be around adult social care. But we do have Baroness Casey coming to speak to us next week or the week after. Week after. And she is doing the review for adult social care for the government at the present time. So we will be doing everything possible to make sure they understand those difficulties. And we need to make sure that government understands the difficulties. I'd love to have a minister here to take him across Shropshire, him or her across Shropshire, so they understood the distances that we actually have to deliver services over, which costs time for the people we're employing, fuel, huge ranges of other things, just to get to places and get back again. And we have 1,234 square miles of Shropshire. That's not insignificant. We are not like Birmingham, which I think is 130 square miles with all of their population stuck in it. And I think their population's over 4 million, whereas ours is barely 350,000. It's a significant difference. And therefore we are in a different place. But making people understand, they never understand until they see it. That's the most important thing. So if we can get a minister here through Julia, through Rosemary and her colleagues, then that would be really, really powerful. So can we go to the vote then, please? We've moved and second, all those in favour of the amendments, yes. Thank you. Right. We now need, I think, does everybody need a quick comfort break? I'll give you, if I need, have you back in here by 25 past so that we can just have a quick comfort break and then we'll carry on. Yeah. We'll now move on with the Treasury Management update.
This report will be even shorter. As it says in the report, at the end of Q3, the council held, and it was referred to earlier on, £24.2 million in investments and £414.7 million of borrowing. The Treasury team achieved a 4% return on the available cash, which equates to an extra 1.982 million for the council. Cash balances are lower than in many previous years, and consequently there is a need to ensure cash balances are highly liquid. Again, I feel this is largely a factual report, and therefore I move the recommendations listed in 3.1 in the report.
Anybody want to comment, raise anything? Complete silence. Thank you. So I have a proposer then, Roger, and a seconder, Alex. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Right, we now move on to the Performance Monitoring Report, Q3. As you know, this is quite an important report because it actually shows us where services are delivering to their key performance indicators across the board. And there's always some good news and some bad news in that, and areas where we need to put in more effort or look at how we can improve those. So this report is in a position where you can actually look at a dashboard so that you can see how those figures are moving and so on. It is useful across the board, and I think we need to make sure that we're looking at that in more detail as we go on, alongside being very, very careful with how we're spending money. So by and large, we have 69% of 20 KPIs which are above their target. 3% of indicators were similar to their original target, and they're in amber, and 28%, that's 8 KPIs that are below their target and are showing as exceptions. So if we look at the ones that are performing well, performance positions for this quarter, 72% of the newly updated indicators are above or similar to their target, compared to 78% last quarter. So we've had a slippage. Okay. So the improvements. James, would you like to talk about the improvements in housing?
Thank you. And I just wanted to highlight how the hard work of our housing service has more than halved the number of households in B&B accommodation. At the end of December, there were just 40 households requiring B&B placements, down from 100 in Q2, which is well below the target of 60. Whereas at the height of the peak, the council's use was at 200, with an average B&B stay being £70 per night, and peak dates actually being higher. Government only subsidises £92 per week for B&B, regardless of the costs, compared to 100% for subsidising for the new scheme costs. So there's clearly significant cost savings for the council, as well as improved options for temporary accommodation for large numbers of vulnerable people. This achievement reflects the impact of strengthened homelessness prevention efforts and increased access to more suitable temporary accommodation. The service has invested in earlier intervention and expanded support for vulnerable households. Working alongside STAR, we've introduced 4 new in-house temporary accommodation schemes, delivering over 100 bed spaces for single individuals. Just to give the Cabinet an idea of what these schemes involve, they provide not only safe and stable short-term housing, but also more intensive on-site support. Residents can access referral to key agencies, including mental health and substance misuse services, and develop essential independent living skills such as cooking. Just last week, I was told of a good news story about one of our tenants in this scheme who is accessing the support that he needs, and I do want to personally wish him well on wish him the best on his next steps. Clearly, this approach is actively helping to improve the long-term outcomes for individuals, reducing financial pressures on the council, and ensures accommodation better supports health, well-being, and stability. The work won't stop here. While continuing to focus and increase our homelessness prevention offer, we're working with our social housing providers to increase the support available for Move On, ensuring vulnerable individuals and households are better prepared to move into their own properties after they've had a stay in temporary accommodation. I just want to record my thanks to the whole housing team for this amazing achievement, and especially the staff in these new facilities who have seen firsthand just how much they care about the incomes for any resident of our county who's become homeless and requires support in these schemes.
I think this is a really good example of where we can improve people's lives, but actually cost them the services less, which is really important just at the moment. But we also need to be aware that the work doesn't stop. You have to keep going. It's an important part of prevention, and prevention is going to be having to be running through all our services so that we reduce costs everywhere. So it's just one good example. Our recycling rates, which always trouble me, are actually at 53%, but we need to work harder on those, and I think David will just fill us in on that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously these figures, paragraph 8.3, relate to July, September. Obviously, that's the period during which a large amount of green waste is generated, and so these figures are somewhat inflated, if you like. We are working very hard to restart food waste collections, and obviously we've got this Tetra Pak and plastic film coming down the line, so there will be a lot of more recycling going on as we go forward.
Great, so there's work going on to actually improve that, and I remember as we went unitary, South Shropshire District Council's recycling rates were running at 54.3, I think, recycling. So to be only at 53 during the summer months is not as good as we should be, and we should be better across the whole county. So, and then we have social work assessment timeliness has improved, which is great because, again, that's part of prevention and so on. I'm not sure that Sarah is in the position to be able to comment on that. For Ruth?
Well, just to say that 90% is seen as nationally excellent performance, so all credit to the team for achieving that in challenging circumstances.
That's great. Thank you very much. And then we move on to the exceptions, which we always need to concentrate on, and EHCPs are a major issue across the country. I think, Andy, you're going to...
Yeah, on the one, some of the naughty step. Yeah, EHCP timelines continue to be a significant challenge nationally. As from December 2025, our performance stands at 13%. That's down from 18.5 from the previous quarter. Demand continues to exceed capacity. The average timescale for issuing the EHCP has increased to 41.6 weeks, influenced by late assessment advice, increased case capacity, insufficient resources to meet the statutory deadlines. Availability of educational psychology, health and social care advice is now improving. However, pressures with the CAMS and BU remain considerable. This again is a widespread national issue. It is hoped that the anticipated white paper due from government will help in some of these areas. Growth modelling is underway to identify and address staff shortfalls. This will inform a resource injection to support a sustainable recovery plan aimed at improving timelines and capacity across the service. It is therefore worth Cabinet noting that the continued performance challenges relating to EHCP timelines, the ongoing work to align staff practice and provision as we support the development of a resourced recovery plan to improve the statutory compliance and outcomes. And it is also worth mentioning that our staff are working exceedingly hard to meet all these under extreme challenges with the current financial situation.
Thank you. That's useful. Duncan, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, it's only on the food waste. I know I've seen that. Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
It's on the food waste. I know it's seen we're not able to make the statutory obligation of having it in by the 1st of April. I just wondered, what is the target date for introduction of food waste collection?
David, have you got a target date for that? I know we're working hard on it.
We are working hard. We don't have a date at the moment. The paper will be coming forward with more details. But essentially, we are likely to have put forward a fortnightly food waste collection service.
I think one of the major hiccups, of course, is that we have had no funding from DEFRA to implement this at all. None. Which is a significant issue for us. Under financial stress. So we have a percentage of high-risk businesses subject to planned inspections, and that has gone down. Bernie, have you got anything to say about that? I think it's part of your... Right.
Yeah, so just to add in terms of the high risk businesses, just to say that obviously that rate is not where we would want that to be. There is an improvement plan in place. We work obviously with the Food Standard Agency, and we are putting, this is an area we will be putting additional capacity, and we are working to put additional capacity in to support the number of premises, and there's that's aligned to the improvement plan. So that's been agreed. We are actually actively recruiting in that area, and that will increase that rate towards the target.
Thank you. That's good to know. Staff sickness has increased, and that's, well, I'm sure Rachel will comment on this, but it will increase in the winter because there's flu, lots of coughs and colds and all of that. The part of this that I'm pleased to see is that the stress levels are going down, not enough, but it's part of our people plan to make sure that actually our staffing feel better about where they're working, feel supported, and so on. So the other interesting one is the musculoskeletal related absences, and that's dropped by 35%. Is there any reason for that, Rachel, do you think?
I have to say, I haven't got any detail, and that's something we've absolutely, I mean, I think on all of this, as you said, Council, that this is really important. This is really important for us in terms of our people plan, and we've asked for a deep dive in some of these figures because we're really, concerned and need to monitor what's working and what's not working for our staff. There's obviously a number of measures that we've put in place. As you said, in particular over winter, we do see fluctuations in these figures, but I think overall this is still an area of concern. We've asked for some more information, which we're absolutely happy to share, and make sure that we've got the right actions in place, and particularly in terms of our people plan around that. We do have obviously referral programs to things to our occupational health and other services, but it's just making sure we've got the right offers in place for our staff. So yeah, so absolutely an area of concern. I know we're going to be doing a much more of a deep dive on that.
Bernie.
Yes, thank you very much, Rachel. I'd just like to point out that many organisations will offer and fund the vaccinations required for winter viruses, and I will be looking to see how much we can do that as a routine for Shropshire Council employees, so that the absences due to with seasonal respiratory infections we'd hope to reduce.
Thank you very much. Right, okay, if we move on to the FOI compliance, this is an important governance issue, and Tanya's been working really hard on this to make sure we bring it down to the targets. It's still not quite there, but it's something that's now being embedded across the organisation. The reason that we really need to do this is, one, actually, it's a criminal act if we don't do it, and the buck stops with our chief exec. Secondly, it actually cuts the number of complaints. If we get our FOIs done and we're using what we've already done that is on the website, then the numbers of complaints coming in about the fact that we haven't done our FOI, that just keeps staff doing all sorts of other things rather than their day job, will reduce. So it's really important we get a really good handle on this. It's good for the organisation, but it's also good for our staffing because then they can be doing their day jobs. I don't know whether it's Tanya, you want to add anything to that.
Just to say how important good governance is for this council, and compliance to good governance. The target that we're aiming for is by the end of March, we'll have no FOIs over 20 days, and I'm pleased to report that we're on target for that. And indeed, the buck does stop with me, and I don't require a prison sentence right now. So the organisation is very well aware of where the buck stops and the importance of good governance.
Thank you. And the last bits that I'll flag, and it is concerning to me in particular, is overweight and obese children and we look at reception in year sixes. It's a really, really difficult issue, and all sorts of things lay behind that, but we've got some projects that are ongoing, so I don't know whether anyone wants just to comment on those.
Yeah, thank you. And I know there's a good conversation at scrutiny around this particular indicator, and a number of the indicators that are in our performance report are rightly actually cross partners. In terms of how we have to deliver this, because although we've got it in our report, there's some actions that we are taking as a local authority, and you can see some of the work around our public health nursing service, which we commission, some great work going on around brilliant bodies and some of the pilots that are happening there in terms of addressing healthy weight and making and obviously it takes a whole system response, and that's why we've got a healthy weight strategy to respond to that. It's obviously a key cornerstone of prevention in terms of people's healthy outcomes. Actually, it links back to some of the healthy stuff. So it's a really fundamental diabetes rates and healthy life expectancy. So we do have a healthy weight strategy. If you look at that, actually a lot of that also focuses on the environment that we live in. It focuses on food security, which we know is more of a challenge in rural areas. So this is not just short-term measures that we need to take, it's much longer term, and it requires all partners, but some great work that is going on with our children, young people, with families. But this it starts actually pre-conception in terms of children, young people. It's that best start in life, and making sure that we offer the right advice and support families, but also then access to the environment. So you can see that it's a real partnership, long term, but very important area that we need to focus on. So it just highlights some of the good work that's taking place, but obviously, as you said, it is worrying that trend, and it will have a significant impact on our population over many years to come if we can't resolve this and work together.
Thank you. So has anybody anything else they want to raise? Anything else they've picked out of the report? And
so just one thing, Chair. Really pleased to see the staff turnover figures. They're reducing all the time, and I think that's a reflection of, first of all, the administration, and secondly, the leadership of the council. And I think that should be noted.
Great, thank you.
I'll just pick up on the KPI for workplace pay gap.
Yes.
Would we be able to sort of quantify and qualify what that means in Shropshire? Because obviously, in the context of Birmingham, that was a big deal. Basically, bankrupted the council. I'm sure we don't have that sort of situation here, but I'd be interested to know where we are with that and what it means in Shropshire.
It's interesting you raised that, because I wrote it on my piece of paper saying I ought to find out more about that, and I didn't. So, Rachel.
I think that's one we'll have to take away and get a bit more information in terms of the detail around that. There's obviously some information update provided in the report, but we can find some more detailed response if there's particular areas you would want to understand that.
That'd be great, thank you.
Okay, I will then, if there's nothing else, I will propose, and Alex is going to second, thank you. All those in favour of adopting the report? Thank you. Right. Having given Roger a rest, we now move on to the financial monitoring report Q3.
I can see some sun through the window. I see it stopped raining. And I'll switch my microphone on. Yes, this report is a result of another deep dive. A dive into the accounts to try and ensure that the report is as accurate as possible. It is a report up to the end of December, and it is what we are basing the budget figures on. So that's why we needed to do the deep dive. A P8 report, period 8, was not produced due to staff capacity, and I can confirm that there is an intention of producing monthly reports for the rest of this year. We just needed the staff to do that deep dive so that we could see the report that's here today. It will be seen that the overspend has worsened slightly by £2.516 million since the last report, labelled as P7, was produced. This has meant that there is a need to cover this extra amount using cash from the Financial Strategy Reserve recently established to achieve the needed end-of-year published position. As already reported and mentioned in other reports being considered today, the answer to our request for up to £71.1 million in emergency financial support for this year has not yet been given. Without emergency financial support, we would not be able to balance our books. How and what this money is to be used for is shown in section 2.5. Finally, we continue to plan for a projected year-end balance of £5 million. The operations boards continue to meet and oversee what the council is doing. Discussions with the MHCLG are continuing, and they are aware that an answer to our request is needed in the next few days. I move the recommendations listed in 3.1 A to F.
Thank you, and I will take a seconder. Does anyone want to add anything more to this? Duncan?
Just hot off the press, not necessarily relevant to 25/6, but we yesterday got sign off from our external auditors for the 24/25 accounts, which was a bit of a arm wrestle, but it's finally done. So well done to everyone involved with that.
Absolutely.
Can I add my thanks to that for our staff, but also for getting that sign off, because we do need that, so that we can show that our accounts for last year were there and we did everything that we said that we were going to do.
We didn't actually get the final sign off from MHCLG, did we, until Friday?
It's very tricky.
And we couldn't get anything signed off until they had done that. So, and that was on the EFS from the previous administration, which was 20 million. So that was signed off, and then they've worked wonders this end to get Grant Thornton to sign off the account. So it's all done and dusted. Great. So anything else about financial monitoring? Okay, in which case I have a proposer and a second.
Kevin, before we leave this, can I just say a personal thanks to Manny?
Yes.
I think took on a job which she thought she wanted and landed with far more extra due to happenings within the council. So it's thanks to Manny, who finishes on Friday, for all the work and the contribution she has made. I valued her support and advice. I think the council is the better for it.
I think everybody in the room has valued Manny's input into all of this, because she has made the budget and all the figures understandable to all of us. And it's been very, very clear, and she's worked her socks off. So thank you. And I think we'd all like to join you in doing that. Okay. Thank you. Right. Shall we now move to a vote? All those in favour? Thank you very much. Right, now we move on to the adult social care deferred payment policy, which Sarah Marston is going to present for Ruth Houghton. Sarah supports is the deputy portfolio holder for social care with Ruth, and unfortunately Ruth is at a funeral today. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm pleased to present this report to Cabinet today on behalf of Ruth. It describes the work that teams have done to update the current deferred payment policy, which was approved initially in 2015 after the Care Act 2014 and hasn't been updated since. The Council has reviewed the current policy to ensure it's up to date and reflects current processes and associated costs to providing this service. A deferred payment agreement is a formal arrangement that allows individuals to delay paying for care home fees by securing the debt against their property. Instead of selling their home immediately, the local authority pays the care costs up front and the amount is recovered later, usually when the property is sold or from the estate after death. A deferred payment agreement is a statutory duty the councils must offer to eligible individuals, subject obviously to statutory criteria. Deferred payment agreements offer people reassurance and options at a difficult time. They allow eligible residents to move into residential or nursing care without the immediate pressure of selling their home, giving them control, stability and time to make the right decisions for themselves and their families. The updates we're proposing today are designed to modernise the policy, ensure it's fully compliant with the Care Act and reflect the real cost of providing a safe, well-managed service. By updating our fees and strengthening our processes, we're not only bringing ourselves in line with other local authorities, but we're also creating a more resilient, transparent and sustainable approach for the future. And importantly, improving the experience for residents who apply for a deferred payment. The updated policy and work across the teams also responds directly to audit recommendations and gives us opportunity to enhance our oversight, improve consistency and increase capacity, particularly through additional legal support. These improvements will importantly help us deliver a smoother, more efficient experience for residents and a clearer, more robust framework for staff. In conclusion, this is a positive piece of work carried out across multiple teams that improves quality, strengthens assurance, consistency, and ensures that the residents' interaction with the council is clear and supportive, especially at what can be a difficult and challenging time for them and their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Do we have any questions around any of this? Brendan.
Apologies. I know I asked some question earlier, but have you modelled out what the average person have to pay extra on the average house in Shropshire? Sorry, just that. Yep.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, it is in the report what the charges were like previously and then what they will look like now. Just trying to find the section of the report. 3.3. Yeah, thank you.
Everything else 3.2 in my earlier version. Okay, I'll find out. Thank you.
Okay, Bernie.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. You may not know, but is there any problem with collection of this this money once it becomes due?
I don't have that to hand actually. I'll have to come back to you on that one.
I think there has been in the past, in that the legal department have been hollowed out, so we haven't necessarily had everything in place, but I think going forward things will change. Right, okay. If that's we've finished. Thank you very much, Sarah. You were proposing and Alex is seconding. All those in favour? Thank you. So we now have determination of admissions arrangements from Andy Hall, and you have officer support.
I do indeed. Thank you, Chair. Shropshire Council, as the administration authority for all community and voluntary controlled schools, must determine the school admissions arrangements every year by the 28th of February, as per the school admission code, the legislation we work to. For the 27-28 admission arrangements, the arrangements being determined by council this year, we propose only one change mentioned in 2.3 and 7.5 of the report. We propose to change the definition of a sibling to older sibling to a sibling in the oversubscription criteria. The proposed changes come about due to the coordinated in-year process, revealing that the older sibling criteria was very much geared to the point of entry transfer when applies. Since administering in-year admissions, it's become clear that it doesn't work. Having the criteria altered to a sibling makes it both easier and fairer, not just to the families, but onto processes for in-year points of entry transfer. Furthermore, it keeps the oversubscription criteria for the community and voluntary controlled schools in line with academies, therefore giving a consistent approach across the county. Consultation ran from the 28th of November 25 through to the 16th of January 2026 with no responses received. So I therefore propose that Cabinet approve the recommendations in 3.1, and we do have an officer here that can ask any further questions.
Okay, any questions around all of this? If we had no responses?
No responses.
That's interesting. Does that mean we hid it on the website?
No, I don't think so, because why leave hid?
I don't know. I was just asking the question because historically we haven't been very good, and I'm trying to at consulting. Would you like to answer that? Where did?
Thank you. Sorry. It certainly wasn't hitting on the website. It also, as per the school admissions codes, has to be shared with a wide range of stakeholders, including other local authorities, parents ranging from 0 to 25. So it's shared with all nursery groups, through local libraries, through all schools, including special settings as well as independent sector.
Great. I needed you to say that. Thank you very much. That's very useful. So any other questions? No. Okay. Thank you. Proposer?
Indeed.
Seconder? Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So we now move on to the dedication of a local nature reserve at Erdington, and it's James that's presenting this one.
Thanks, Chair, and I'm happy to introduce this paper and recommend that Shropshire Council designates the land at Erdington Nature Reserve as a local nature reserve. The hope is that this declaration will help to raise the profile of the site and increase public usage. I'd also like to highlight how there is no cost associated with the designation, and the consultation report that has been compiled for approval by Natural England was compiled by a skilled volunteer with the support of the Friends group, meaning that the amount of officer time needed was much reduced. I wish to thank John Box and the Friends of Erdington Nature Reserve for their hard work and dedication for this local site, both in managing it day to day, as well as compiling this report that comes before us today. This is such a brilliant example of how, by working with dedicated volunteers and partners, Shropshire Council can enable others to provide brilliant services and facilities for the residents of Shropshire and visitors, as well as protecting our natural environment. So I'm happy to move the recommendations in the report and ask that John and all the other volunteers have passed the message of our thanks as being recommended.
Thank you. Dave.
I'm happy to second it. As it was in my former Shropshire County Council division, I'm very pleased with see the progress that's taken place over that, and it does in the report have the invitation for members to go and have a look, and I'll be very happy to go. But if anybody else wants to go, then please do.
I think we ought to let everyone know across the council that that's a possibility. So maybe in a communication, because there will be local members down who like to go as well. So I think that's useful. So I have a proposer and a seconder, unless there's anything anybody wants to ask. No? All those in favour? Thank you. Unanimous. We move on to Alex Wagner and devolution of local services to town and parish councils. And Rob, because he's the leader of Shrewsbury Town Council, has left for a minute. Thank you.
Fabulous. So, thank you, Liz. So we had a discussion earlier in this meeting about the task and finish on partnership report, which talked about sort of the principle of the wider devolution policy and where it's heading. If it's okay, I don't want to recap that ground, and I would rather talk about what is in the paper in front of us, which is the first tranche, the first phase of a devolved model specifically for street scene in this instance, although conversations are ongoing about a number of other services, some of which we've also heard about in this meeting. So 4 pilot areas through essentially making themselves known to us and indicating that they would be keen on proceeding with being an early model for devolved street scene services, whether that's full or par, were identified about 7 or 8 months ago in the form of Shrewsbury, which is a proposal for the full devolution of the street scene and grounds maintenance service. Broseley and Oswestry, where there is a proposal for part devolution of this street scene and grounds maintenance, but predominantly green spaces, open spaces, and similar. And Shifnal, who, after discussions, we've come up with a model which we're sort of referring to as an enhanced model, where we still provide a number of services in Shifnal, but they build on top of that directly, rather than there being a clear delineation of whether or not it's street scene or grounds maintenance, as in some of the other part devolution models. All 4 parish councils have now set budgets and I believe submitted precepts which account for the fact that we've made an agreement with them over 66% of the relevant costs being paid to them in the next financial year, and them taking on those services. We have, I think, been as flexible as we can be, though the plan going forward is to further look at that street scene service in particular, but also other services, things like libraries, leisure and culture services, and a number of others where we might be able to come to agreements in future years. The premise for this is about local choice. We want to create a system whereby local councils, which represent local communities, have local choice over the level of service they want above and beyond that statutory level. We've heard, even in my own ward in Shrewsbury, for example, that CCTV, which I understand is part of the Shrewsbury Town Council arrangements slightly separate to this paper, but connected to their budget, Shrewsbury was the only place receiving any Shropshire Council subsidy at all, and it's a non-statutory service. Actually, there are many examples like that throughout the council where we need to create a level of parity as we take on our external auditor's recommendation to reduce to a level of service in many areas which I think residents will deem unacceptable and certainly protest to councillors about. So this paper essentially is a relatively simple instrument. It means that we can go and formalise those agreements which have been developed with the 4 town councils. There is a consistent 66% rate we're suggesting, and in this paper across the 4, and the detail of the individual arrangements we've also put in a provision has to be agreed by the 31st of March this year. I understand our legal team have already done most of all of the groundwork ahead of this, and that we set up an operations board, the membership of which we will discuss with group leaders and cabinet, to meet a minimum of once a year, realistically far more often than that, to monitor the operation of the delegated service in these areas, alongside the fundamental and important role that the Partnership Scrutiny Committee through Transformation and Improvement will be taking. So I'm very happy to recommend this and take any questions, but I think this is essentially a paper which specifically refers to those 4 already sketched out agreements, specifically on street scenes, specifically with 4 town councils who've agreed to our suggestion and work with us on that, which we're incredibly grateful for.
Questions, comments? Rose.
Yeah, thanks for this report. I've got a few questions. As I said earlier, I'm also a Shrewsbury Town Councillor, so I come at this from that point of view as well, but really from the point of view of my residents and those around Shropshire. So in the summary 2.1, we talk about pilot areas, and that's mentioned further through the report on a number of occasions. And I would like to understand a little bit more about what a pilot is in this context. So I'm concerned for town councils who go to the expense of setting up services, including expensive machinery purchases or leasing or whatever, staff recruitment, setting up, expanding offices, that kind of thing, all the associated costs, duping people from current Shropshire Council contractors, which is not a cheap thing to do. So what is a pilot in that sense? Does that imply permanence or impermanence of this arrangement, given those investments that town councils will make on behalf of their taxpayers? And then at 2.2, as talked about, there's a comment that says this approach enables Shropshire Council to manage its costs while giving town councils the flexibility to fund and implement any service enhancements through their own resources and funding arrangements. Is there an implication there that we here at Shropshire Council will expect to see a demonstrable contract cost reduction attributable to this initiative? So will we see costs going up for our town councils, but will there be a commensurate drop in the unitary authorities' costs in that area? And finally, sorry, a few questions I have. At 3.2, an operations board be established to meet a minimum of once a year to monitor the operations of the delegated services with joint membership from Shropshire Council and town councils. So my understanding of this was that we were looking at actually passing responsibility to the town councils, and this adds to that fear that I have about impermanence. So if this is to be controlled by Shropshire Council but carried out by town councils, that leaves the town councils unable to sort of manage their own destiny, and that's a big concern for me about the whole thing, and a concern that residents have expressed as well. So just to give a little bit of background to that, Shrewsbury Town Council has had an SLA in place since It was formed when the unitary was formed in 2009. It was a 15-year contract that came to an end in 2024. And I think the Town Council with Shropshire Council has been engaged in negotiations to try to settle that for something like 2 years before it expired. And those were quite, lengthy negotiations that really didn't come to fruition. Obviously, this has got in the middle of it now, but the agreement ran out before it was re-implemented and resettled. So those are my concerns. Thank you.
So to take those sort of 4 points, so pilot is slightly distinct from, I suppose, trial. These are the first places taking a step that we anticipate many places will are interested in taking or will indeed take. Part of that is why in this paper we have put in year 2 and future year funding as part of the paper. So 66%, 58% then. By that point, the council ought or will have had to implement that external auditor's recommendation about clearly defining minimum service provision. So though it is a pilot, these are the first places to do it. We've been open with the 4 areas that we are working this out as well as them. It's not just us imposing something. They do have the guarantee, if this paper is passed, of funding in years 2, 3 and onwards. I think what you're getting at, which is there is a strong incentive, having done the initial work, to keep it up, is correct. There is, and I think that's a good thing, because Shropshire Council is not going to be in a position to deliver high quality local services in these areas to the level residents expect going forward. It arguably already doesn't, in fact, and I certainly get that feedback from residents. On 2P implications, we're currently working that through with our contractors, and I know that all of the relevant town councils have had some conversations about that. I had a conversation yesterday with Oswald Street Town Council where it was mentioned, and I know Juan Hernandez, who's the Street Scene Alliance Manager, is working those issues through. There can be costs associated to 2P, but there also can not be. And I think probably what we've learned from getting these pilots going is that we need to present a worst case scenario about 2P. But that is not to say that that's particularly likely, especially where you've got a service like we've got, which is currently county-wide. You've got people who live all over, many of whom don't live in county, and actually our contractors or future in-house provision of street scene, for example, will still exist somewhere. So yes, let's take Brazeley as an example. We might have, say, 0.2 of an individual member of staff. That is a 2P risk, but it's a low risk, and it's not for us to determine that risk. It's for the town councils that we're working with to determine that risk in large extent, and similar on best value. On the point about 2.2 and the street scene change and contract cost reduction, we are committed to changing the model of delivery, making it more flexible, but also reducing it to that minimum, because as I see it, any spend that we have at this council that's discretionary or non-statutory is borrowing. We probably are in a position, as we've heard earlier, where even if we were just discharging our statutory duties, we could well still be in deficit and still be borrowing. The cost of borrowing is immense. So yes, I know Andy and the street scene team are working hard on potential change to that contract, which have the idea being we create a more flexible model for next year, which means there can be more buy-in to devolved models, but also which reduces our costs, as you say, to a similar level to which we're suggesting. Finally, operations board with joint membership. Yeah, as I say, this is, you're right. Shropshire Council is the principal authority. Shropshire Council has the power. Similarly, Shropshire Council has had the power over that existing SLA. It's had the power over all of these agreements since its inception in 2009. I think it was intimately involved in the discussions about what powers different towns and parishes had in the first instance, and made decisions over that. So whilst that's true, if you look throughout the country at places like Buckinghamshire and Devon and Milton Keynes are the 3 examples that come to mind, these sorts of models where you have an operations board, you have joint membership, you have that open discussion and transparency with your partners in towns and parishes about delivering services, but also about where we're going in future, do exist, do work, have to be built on some shared trust. I'm hoping, though, that as we go ahead with this, and as we have not just theoretical discussions over these issues, but actual practical real-world examples in areas that cover about a third of the population of Shropshire, of how it works, how it doesn't work, what we need to change. I think that that's probably the best thing we can do to build further trust. So yeah, I do take all of those points, but I think that they're challenges we can work through rather than sort of insurmountable difficulties.
Great. Okay. Brendan.
Changing the sort of emphasis towards the parish council, the more rural areas. Obviously, the pilot is running in town councils, fair enough. I don't want to go over the ground too much earlier from the task and finish report, but is this evolving into essentially a initiative for towns, or is there any traction with parishes? And further to that, certainly I'm not getting much interest from the parishes in my division. For those who are just not going to be involved in this in the future, can you provide any guarantee that at least the current level of service will be maintained, or potentially, you know, if they're never going to be able to do that because they're too small, that essentially, if there are any gaps in current provision of street scene service, for example, that will be made good because it's just not practical for them to participate in the scheme?
Thanks, Brian. So I think it goes two ways with the rural parishes. So first of all, what we're talking about, this specific paper, is some pilots for towns of varying sizes. It's the first step. Having those rural parishes buy in different ways is vital. Devolution is not just about street scene. Some of these big capital costs involved in street scene, like sweepers, you're right, a very small rural parish. I grew up in Melverley Parish, which precepts £500 a year. I know that that's not going to be where they get to. The advantage a parish like that has, though, and already does in practice, is when Melverley floods, for example, they don't wait around for Shropshire Council necessarily. They have their own boat owned by the parish council. They have a parish hall with provision. There are ways of small community self-help which can be done at a small rural level, which can't be replicated in a big town or maintaining a town centre. I was at Cardington the other week, where there was a lot of suggestion about, well, if we're talking about hedgerows and potholes on small roads in the middle of the village, which have very little traffic, can we do that ourselves voluntarily? Yes, that can't be a model for Shrewsbury or Oswestry or A roads for that matter. Similarly, we're doing the lanes partnership in Church Preen. They've been out today in Church Preen doing sort of lengthsman work, which our street scene team have facilitated. So it goes both ways. This is about trying some of the bigger changes out and seeing what the implications of working them through in full are. But it won't just be a rural offer, an urban offer. Sorry, it'll be a rural offer too. And we are working on ways of making that practicable. And that could be clustering arrangements with neighbours. That could be just having Shropshire deliver the basic service, which is going to provide everywhere, or transfer the money over, and then to have them enhance it in whichever way they see fit. So we can do that. But there's a specific question I won't skirt around. Can we guarantee that the current level of service will continue? No. The Shropshire Council is spending well beyond its means. It has significant discretionary spending funded by borrowing. We are not in a position to continue the current level of service, of discretion, of sort of non-statutory spend in the county in general. I don't think street scene should be exempt from that, and I don't think we should take out ever greater loans to fund it. So I think we need to be direct with places about that. We're not going to be messing around, but we're going to be facilitating local choice as best we can. The final point I'd say is that there are sort of specific rural benefits which towns can't benefit from in terms of some of those wider services that aren't street scene. So even though it's a larger parish, in the scheme of things, based in Hill, which is a village of sort of 1,500 houses or so, we're having discussions about, for example, library services there, and whether or not there's a model they already contribute, whether or not that could help. Down in Church Stretton, they're working closely with their neighbouring rural parishes around all of these issues. They're not just keeping it to the town, they're leading the way. Councillor Potter isn't here anymore, but I've discussed with him before whether or not there could be a sort of hub and spoke model where Shrewsbury Town Council, for example, which already provides services in most of its neighbouring parishes to some level, could be the contractor. Delegation and devolution are not just about saying you have to do it yourself. They're about asking, how do you want to do it if you have the choice? So yeah, further options will be developed, but for now, this paper is about those four pilots, certainly.
Just to finish off, in terms of that offer, or concept development, whatever you want to call it, with those parish councils? Is there a timeline for when that's going to be crystallised, what you're going to offer and when you're going to do it, so we can have some certainty going forward about, you know, they're going to have to look at the precepts, they're going to have to look at making those arrangements. So will be something coming out soon to at least give a direction of travel to them and a timeline.
Yeah, essentially. And I think we're working towards doing something over the spring so that places have plenty of time to prepare. I'm hoping that by doing what we're doing now with pilots, we at least give a flavour and indicative costs in some instances and indicative, you know, challenges that they might have to start thinking about and starting to consult their residents about ahead of time, you know, well in advance of a precept setting, which is in 11 or 12 months for most places now effectively. But yeah, the idea is to offer a more extensive programme based on expressions of interest, based around local choice. Similarly, you know, I know many places are just not interested and that's allowed. That, you know, we're not forcing this. It has to be a coalition of the willing. But we know the financial position we're in, and we're not going to make promises that we can't afford about service provision.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? I think this will become much clearer as it evolves over the next couple of years. And I mean, certainly we don't do ditching on verges anymore at the council. We did it historically, but it's not our duty. And suddenly one of my parishes decided they'd like to be able to talk to highways about being able to contract their own local farmer to do the ditching alongside the roads, which would actually help highways tremendously to get the water off the roads. So it's an opportunity. They just need to have the right safety and insurance around them. And so we need to have the right people in place. And it's not something we pay for at the moment, but it's an enabling process, which is also part of what we're trying to do.
Well, actually on that, sort of related subject, one of my constituents has offered previously to resurface a road that leads to his, it isn't an adopted road, but he can't get it resurfaced. He's offered to do it. And the response under previous administration, albeit it was a while back, was that no, you can't do that. But clearly, there's an individual, not a parish council, but essentially want to do the work for us just to get it done. Are we going to be more amenable to that sort of one-off situation?
We are moving to being much more open to find ways and means of doing things when we have volunteers or people who are willing to pay for things up front.
And I would say, I think it's in Church Preen, which Chris Naylor in Benell Division has been very involved in. We are working on trialling as opposed to a pilot, whether or not the parish with volunteers using their public liability insurance and other insurance could do that sort of pothole work on smaller rural roads, which are unlikely to get done. So yeah, that's complicated, but it's possible. And other places do it. And in Devon, it's been done. So if Devon can do it, I don't see why Shropshire can't have a look.
So I know this is not at this level, but are you happy for me to open that dialogue with this individual?
That would be good. I'd say Councillor Naylor would be a good person to talk to as well, because he's been intimately involved in putting that together.
And it's making sure while we're getting staff to the point where they actually understand about working with communities, because it's a very different way of working within the council, putting them in touch with the person who is going to facilitate that, rather than just getting somebody who doesn't understand where we've got to. So it's going to take some time to train and embed that across the whole organisation. So yes, have those conversations, and then we can have a productive conversation rather than one that says, no, you can't do it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Anything else? Yeah. Great. Okay. I have a proposer and a seconder. James, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you very much. We now move on to Town and Parish Council's asset transfer policy and process, and we're back to Roger. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. This is dual with the previous paper as well, and it shows where we as an administration wish to go. And as a key parish councillor, not a town councillor, a parish councillor, and I've just been working it out for maybe getting on for 40 years. I'm very much want parishes involved with this. And what it is, it's how we propose to put the revised policy into practice. And it was summed up in the previous report by Councillor Wagner. Shropshire Council is progressing a strategic programme of devolution designed to empower town and parish councils to take greater ownership of local priorities, aligned with our commitment to partnership work in financial sustainability. And it is there in recommendation 3.1 and 3.2. And it is about treating parishes as an equal partner. It is an uphill struggle because of the way they feel they've been treated in the past. They've been ignored, and they are, as far as I'm concerned, and certainly as far as Councillor Wegner and everybody else is concerned, they are equal partners in this, and it is working together and trying to make it easier to do that transfer with less bureaucracy and but satisfy all the legal criteria that goes with it. So I propose that 3.1 and 3.2 is recommended and adopted.
Okay. Dave.
I'd be happy to second it. I've been to some of the meetings with Alex and Roger. It will simplify the whole process. It'll be something that's scalable, so it'll work for small and large, which is obviously concerned in the previous item. So there's some of the simple things can just go through the system really quickly and just get off the books and then free up the headroom for the other bigger items.
I am sure that Bishop's Castle and the abattoir will be delighted that we're going to be adopting this, because it's been like pulling teeth, transferring a building that actually can be used for nothing else, and the area actually wants to adopt it. So I'm fully supportive. Anybody else? Alex?
Just very quickly, the obvious question that could have been asked is, does this replace a process, or what came before it? This does not replace a process, really. I think town councils and parish councils have been essentially treated as either a sort of charity or a business, depending on the nature of it over the years, and that's not really appropriate. So this is a sort of new process that doesn't change an existing one. It just clarifies what town and parishes ought to be doing if they're interested.
Yeah, absolutely. Bernie.
Thank you, Leader. As a Shrewsbury town resident and also a keen golfer, I'd be very keen for the male golf course to be part of the asset transfer. I thought I'd just make that point now. Thank you.
I wondered where you'd get male golf course into this meeting. Thank you. Anything else? Right. Oh, Brendan.
Unsurprisingly, I've got a question.
It's not the golf course.
No, occasionally I indulge in it, but not as keen.
Okay.
Yeah. We've had this discussion before, obviously, and I've put it to my parish councils. They don't really have much in the way of assets to inherit, as it were, and sort of take off your books. But in terms of maybe useful assets, I'm thinking more in terms of, say, plant equipment, ride-on mowers, road repair equipment. Has there been any investigations into it, in the context of the previous item about the devolution, that if you want to take on services, can you essentially sweeten the deal, but also get an asset off your book? Has that been a consideration? So they get a piece of equipment to, say, share between several councils, but then they've taken on the responsibility for it. Is that included in the?
Yeah, so when we're doing sort of individual arrangements, almost we can consider any of that. A better example might be public waste bin, where the waste goes. We've worked on a way to ensure that Shropshire can just take that in as part of its Veolia contract, rather than insist on, for example, the pilots each having a different contract with a different private contractor to do a job. So we can do that stuff. And I think probably when it comes to bigger heavy machinery like road sweepers and so on, we will need to do something like that if we want this to succeed on a very great scale, particularly in the rural areas. I'd say it's not necessarily what this process would be used for, though. I think a good example is I had a conversation with an Albrighton parish councillor out in the east of the county about the bits of grass between the road and people's houses, which have not really been properly maintained and are a bit overgrown and generally unpleasant for the area, and whether or not that could be a good example of something that could be used. Similarly, I know there's discussions with Broseley about new allotments and Shifnal about youth club provision, and it's those sort of things are really what this will mainly be used for. Whereas I think probably for kind of capital investment, that probably is more case by case around the street scene contract.
Thank you. Right. I take this to the vote. Roger.
If I can take liaison a little bit, members will see that Claire Williams is looking at this. And can I introduce her to those who don't know? She is the Deputy 151 officer.
Oh, she will be.
Will be. Okay.
When, yes.
Yeah.
When Manny has left us.
Yeah. Starting next week. Yes. But that's who Claire Williams will be coming forward.
Okay. Thank you very much. Welcome, Claire. I hope you've found the meeting fascinating with all of the finance papers on it. So
I did, yes. Yes, thank you.
So there will be an interim. I think it's a year's contract, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Right. In which case, can we go to the vote? Because we didn't. All those in favour, thank you. It is unanimous. Wonderful. We now have an application by Oswestry Town Council for Oswestry Parish to be considered as a neighbourhood area. And this is going to be Alex, please, because 2 members of the Cabinet have interests.
Leader, I think this is probably the only other cabinet where every cabinet member is also a town or parish councillor. I think all 10 of us are. Oswestry Neighbourhood Plan Area Designation. This report seeks approval for the parish area of Oswestry to be considered as a neighbourhood area for the purposes of preparing a neighbourhood development plan. The identification of the Oswestry parish area as a neighbourhood area responds positively to our current Shropshire Plan's objectives around healthy economy and healthy environment, as well as a new direction for Shropshire. The purpose of a neighbourhood plan is to shape and direct development by providing detailed planning policies for an area which build on the strategic policies of the local development plan. It is the officer recommendation to proceed with agreeing the parish as a neighbourhood area, and there are no appropriate reasons not to do so, so I'm happy to propose this report.
Thank you. Who's going to second this, please? Roger, thank you. Any comments? Questions? Councillor Kerr, sorry, I missed you on the screen.
Right. No problems ever. Just wanted to say, as the town councillor proposes, delighted it's got to this stage. I think it'll be a very good day for Oswestry, and very grateful to the Cabinet for hopefully approving it.
Excellent. Okay, anything else? Right, let's move to the vote. All those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. Right, Shropshire Schools funding formula. Andy.
Chair. Let's go back in. So, thank you, Chair. The school funding formula is used to determine how part of the council's dedicated schools grant allocation, particularly the schools block, is distributed to Shropshire maintained schools and academies. The individual school budget shares determined by the formula represents a significant proportion of the annual revenue funding for maintained schools for the financial year, and the funding for academies for the financial year. The funding of maintained schools is distributed through the local authority, while the DFE uses a formula allocated funding directly to Shropshire academies for the county's free schools. I have sent out a detailed briefing to members this morning, including the DSG position update from government, which you mentioned earlier on, Heather, which outlines the 90% pay write-off of that. Therefore, proposing the Cabinet recommend 3.1. The Cabinet accept the recommendations of Shropshire School Forum on the funding formula for Shropshire schools for the financial year 2026-27 for maintained schools and academies.
Great. I'll have a seconder, please. Alex, right? Anything anyone wants to ask around the funding? No. In which case, can we go to the vote, please? Unanimous. Thank you. Good. Right. We now move to exclusion of the press and public. So to resolve that in accordance with the provisions of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 and paragraph 10.4(3) of the Council's access to information rules, the public and press be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following items. Yeah. Thank you. That's